My brother's wife lied that I flirted her, and he kicked me out. A year later, they begged for a place to stay, so I gave them what they deserved. My older brother Lucas, who is 9 years older than me, invited me to stay with him and his wife Karen. At the moment, I was quite grateful. So who wouldn't be? Rent was incredibly exorbitant, and I didn't make enough to even consider living alone. Lucas had a wonderful house with a spare room, and he told me I could stay there for as long as I needed to get back on my feet. It seemed like a lifeline, so I moved in with them. It wasn't a permanent solution, but I was trying to get myself together, you know. I didn't want to be a burden, so I did my best to help around the house. I performed the cooking, cleaning, and errands. I didn't contribute much money at first because I couldn't even purchase my own groceries, but I pitched in wherever possible. For example, if I had any extra money, I'd spend it on groceries or other necessities. I thought things were going nicely at first. Everything appeared perfect. Karen seemed nice enough, and Lucas and I had always been close, so I felt comfortable. Karen and I weren't best friends, but I didn't see any problems between us. She never said much and stayed to herself, but I never took it personally. She was pregnant at the time, so I assumed she was just dealing with personal issues. However, after around 6 months, things began to turn weird, albeit in subtle ways. Karen would offer subtle hints like, "Oh, when the baby comes, we're going to need a lot more space," or, "I wonder if we should start thinking about how to turn the guest room into a nursery." I had the impression that Mom wanted me to leave, but Lucas continued encouraging me, saying, "Don't worry about it. You can stay as long as you need." I trusted him because, well, he's my brother. Why should I think otherwise, right? Then the comments became less subtle. Karen began moaning more openly, saying things like, "It's going to be really hard having a newborn and a third person in the house." I wasn't trying to overstay my welcome, but I also didn't have somewhere else to go just now. I had finally found a solid job by this point, but I didn't have enough money saved to just pack my bags and leave right away. Things changed dramatically one day. It's as fresh in my mind as it was yesterday. Karen was seated in the living room, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up from supper. Lucas wasn't home yet, and Karen simply started talking to me out of nowhere. She tells me that she is unhappy with my living there, that it is impacting her peace of mind, and that she does not feel secure with some of the individuals I hang out with. I was like, what people? Since I seldom went out, and when I did, it was generally with coworkers or old buddies from college. Karen says, "You know, I heard from Lucas that some of your friends are involved in stuff like drugs, and I don't want that around my baby." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm not even close to anyone engaging in that sort of activity. And I told her this, but she only shrugged, as if she knew something I didn't. I remember feeling my stomach plummet because it was so unexpected. But I assumed she was simply stressed out from the pregnancy and all. I attempted to brush it off, but it didn't end there. Karen became colder following that chat. She'd give me these glances like I was getting in her way, and she hardly spoke to me unless it was to drop more passive-aggressive signals about my departure. I sensed something was wrong, but I didn't want to think she would just make stuff up about me. I mean, this is my brother's wife. Why would she lie? Fast forward a few weeks, and Lucas also begins to behave distant. It is not like him. So I asked him one night if everything was fine, and he just answered, "Karen's been really stressed lately." He didn't say anything particular, but the mood seemed odd, as if he was hiding something. I didn't push him on it. So when Karen became increasingly distant, I didn't think much of it. I assumed she merely needed space or was sorting through her own belongings. But then she started making these tiny comments, which in retrospect were obviously intended to push me out without saying it straight. She'd comment how small the house felt all of a sudden, or how she wanted extra space for the baby's belongings. She once quipped, "Maybe you'll be moving out before the baby comes, right?" And then laughed it off as if nothing happened. I remember laughing with her, but deep down I was thinking, wait, is she serious? It wasn't only the remarks, however. She started to avoid me more. If I was in the living room, she would go upstairs or to another room. I tried to strike up a conversation, ask her about her pregnancy, and see if she needed anything, but she just blew me off. I was starting to feel like a ghost in my house. The strange thing was that Lucas never appeared to notice. He was so preoccupied with the baby and future plans that he missed what was going on right in front of him. Then there was the day Karen revealed that I was purportedly flirting with her. I still can't get my head around it. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Lucas was at work and I had the day off, so I decided to clean around the home and help out since I was staying there for free. Karen was sitting in the living room, browsing through her phone and not paying attention to anything. I was in the kitchen cleaning down the counters when she said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I came over assuming she needed help with something, but the look on her face was strange. She did not appear upset, but there was something odd about her demeanor, as if she was ready to break some severe news to me. So, she began messing with her phone. "I've noticed that you've been, I don't know how to say this, but you've been acting kind of flirty with me." I nearly froze. At first I had no idea what to say because it was so unexpected. Like, what? Am I flirting with her? I chuckled, assuming she was joking. "Wait, what? Flirting with you? That's insane, Karen." But she wasn't laughing. She just stared at me, dead serious. "No, I'm not kidding. Lucas mentioned it to me as well. He said he noticed it a while ago." That's when my stomach fell. Did Lucas notice it? What the hell was she talking about? I had never, and I mean never, thought of Karen in that way. She was my brother's wife, for crying out loud. The idea of flirting with her seemed absurd. "Karen, I don't know what you're talking about," I answered, trying to remain cool. I wouldn't, that's not." But she interrupted me. "Look, I'm just telling you what I feel, and honestly, it's making me uncomfortable. I don't think it's a good idea for you to be here anymore, especially with the baby coming." I felt as if the room was spinning. I wasn't sure how to answer. How do you defend yourself against something that has never happened? I wanted to scream, but I just stood there, absolutely stunned. "Lucas said that?" I eventually managed to inquire. She nodded. But something about how she did it felt odd, like if she wasn't delivering the entire tale, but I couldn't figure out what portion was missing. The rest of the conversation is a haze. Karen kept saying it wasn't personal and was only for the family's safety, but all I heard was that she wanted me gone. The whole flirting thing was bullshit, but I couldn't prove it. The fact that she stated Lucas also observed it hurt the most. My own brother assumed I was hitting on his wife. It did not make any sense. After that day, things became quite stressful in the house. Karen stopped talking to me entirely, and Lucas pretended everything was fine, but I could see he sensed something was wrong. I tried to talk to him about it one night, but he dismissed me saying, "Karen's been really stressed with the pregnancy. Don't take it personally." Don't take this personally. How could I not take it personally when his wife accused me of something ridiculous? It grew worse when Karen began informing Lucas that I was linked with horrible individuals. She told him that some of my friends used drugs, and she didn't want me around the baby if I was bringing that kind of influence into their home. I barely had any pals over. I didn't have a social life because I was working and saving money to move out. But Karen had convinced Lucas that I was hanging around with shady characters. I'm not sure if Lucas believed her or didn't want to deal with the drama, but he began acting strangely around me as well. He'd come home from work and barely speak to me, like if I weren't even there. Karen had clearly gotten into his psyche, but whenever I tried to bring it up, he shut me down. "Just give Karen some space," he said. "She's going through a lot right now." It made no difference what I said. Karen had already made her decision, and she was doing everything she could to force me out. Worst of all, she was using my brother to do it. It was like seeing someone build a case against you for something you did not do, and you are powerless to stop it. By this point, I realized I couldn't stay for much longer. I had already started looking for apartments, but the rent prices made it difficult. I didn't have many options, and I didn't want to wind up on the streets. I was trying so hard to be patient and not rock the boat. But deep down, I knew Karen would eventually make her final move. And when she did, I wasn't sure whether Lucas would support me or agree with her. So it eventually occurred. I knew it was coming, yet it still hit me hard. Karen had been working up to this for weeks, and I guess I was just hoping that Lucas would intervene and urge her to stop it. But it did not happen. I had just returned home from after another hard day at my new job, and all I wanted to do was relax for a while. When I walked through the door, everything seemed peaceful. It's actually too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you feel like something is wrong but you can't pinpoint it right away. As I approached my room, I noticed it. All of my belongings, clothes, books, and other odd items, were packed in boxes and bags and sat in the hallway like trash waiting to be removed. I paused in my tracks. My heart began racing. And for a little moment, I wondered whether there was an error. Maybe Karen was doing some bizarre cleaning, or Lucas was rearranging things. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. This was not a misunderstanding. I came into the living room and saw Lucas sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He didn't look at me at first and didn't say anything, just sat there in an awkward silence. Karen was nowhere to be seen, which left him to perform the dirty work. "What's going on?" I inquired, attempting to maintain a calm demeanor despite my rising irritation. Lucas groaned and finally looked up at me with a sorry expression, as if he were a small child who had been discovered doing something wrong. "Karen, she thinks it's time for you to move out," he told her. His voice was so hushed, as if he was ashamed to utter it. I couldn't believe what I heard. "Are you serious? You're kicking me out just like that after everything?" He did not even attempt to defend himself. He only nodded, gazing at the floor. "It's not like that," he murmured. "It's just, Karen's stressed with the pregnancy and she feels uncomfortable with you being here, with everything going on." "Is everything going on?" What exactly did that mean? I'd done nothing wrong. I had not caused any issues. All I did was live there, serve others, and stay to myself as much as possible. And now I'm being kicked out because Karen felt uncomfortable. It was utter nonsense. Lucas was also aware of the situation, but he was not going to stand up to her. I could see it clearly now. "So that's it? You're just throwing me out on the street?" I inquired, my voice quivering with rage. "Over some lies Karen's been feeding you?" "I've done nothing but help around here, Lucas. You know that?" Lucas stood up, raking a hand over his hair while avoiding eye contact. "I'm not throwing you on the street," he told you. "I'll help you find a place. We can cover your security deposit, maybe even the first month's rent. It's not like we're abandoning you. Not forsaking me." It seemed like the exact opposite. I was not asking for money. I was asking for some respect, for my own brother to have my back rather than just giving up because his wife wanted me gone. "Karen said I was flirting with her, Lucas. She said I was hanging out with bad people. Do you really believe that?" I pleaded, hoping for some type of affirmation that he understood the truth. He didn't respond immediately away, and his quiet revealed everything I needed to know. He either believed her or was too terrified to argue with her. Regardless, I was screwed. "Look," his final response was, "Karen's been really stressed, and with the baby coming, we just need a little more peace in the house. You've been great, and I appreciate everything you've done, but this is what's best for everyone." "What's best for everybody? How about what's best for me?" I wanted to scream, but I knew it wouldn't make any difference. Karen had made her decision, and Lucas was not going to argue with her about it. I was being pushed out, and there was nothing I could do about it. I stood there for a second, trying to digest everything. Part of me wanted to storm out and never look back, but there was nowhere else to go. I didn't have any finances for a new place yet, and I certainly didn't have any family to turn to, at least not after this. Lucas was the only person I believed I could rely on, and now that bridge was burning right in front of me. "When do I have to be out?" I said, my tone flat and despondent. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Karen was hoping by the end of the week," he replied, almost ashamed to admit it. "It's the conclusion of the week. That was 4 days away. 4 stinking days to locate a place to live, pack my belongings, and figure out how to exist on my own." "Right," I mumbled while shaking my head. "Thanks for the heads up, I guess." I turned around and returned to the hallway, where all of my belongings were stacked up. I felt Lucas watching me, but I didn't bother glancing back. What was the point? He was not going to change his mind, and Karen would not allow it. I began picking up the boxes and hauling them back into my room, trying to figure out what to do next. I spent the following few days furiously looking for flats and contacting anyone I could think of who would be willing to let me stay for a bit. It was not easy. Rent was costly, and I hadn't saved enough money yet to afford anything worthwhile. I kept hoping Lucas would come to his senses. Perhaps he'd talk to Karen and understand how unfair the entire situation was. But every time I saw them together, it was evident that wasn't the case. Karen avoided me entirely, scarcely recognizing my existence. Lucas was acting as if everything was absolutely normal. By Friday, I still had not found a place. I was packing up the rest of my belongings into boxes, trying not to cry, when Lucas knocked on the door. He stood awkwardly for a minute, clutching an envelope in one hand. "Here," he said, handing it to me. "It's for the security deposit and the first month's rent. I hope it helps." I accepted the envelope without saying anything. I did not want his money. What I wanted was for my brother to stand up for me, to tell Karen that she was wrong and that I did not deserve to be treated this way. But I knew that wouldn't happen. I left that weekend with my boxes and luggage, feeling more alone than ever before. Lucas scarcely said goodbye. Karen did not emerge at all. I had simply vanished from their lives, as if I had never existed. After being kicked out of Lucas's apartment, I spent the following few months primarily in survival mode. I had nowhere to go at first, so I began sleeping on friends' couches. Do you ever feel like you're intruding on others, even if they say it's fine? That is how I felt every day. I was grateful to my friends for allowing me to stay, but deep down I knew I couldn't do it forever. I was only a guest, and they had their own lives to lead. The most difficult aspect was pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. I didn't want to keep bringing up what happened to Lucas and Karen. I didn't want others to think I was bitter or obsessed with it, but truly, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I can't just forget that my own brother threw me out like I was nothing. But if someone asked how I was doing, I just smiled and replied, "I'm figuring things out." As if it wasn't killing me on the inside. Couch surfing was unpleasant. I couldn't settle somewhere, so I was continuously traveling about with all of my belongings in boxes and bags. It's strange to live out of boxes for so long. You feel like you're constantly on the verge of being tossed out. Every time I left for work, I packed everything just in case. It's as if I didn't believe I'd be welcome back. It screws with your head to live like that. I'll admit that things weren't fantastic for a spell. My job was satisfactory, but it did not provide enough income for me to purchase my own home straight away. I was trying to save, but you know how things go. Every time I thought I was making headway, something came up to deplete my savings: car issues, bills, food. It felt like I was stranded, treading water while trying not to drown. I considered calling Lucas a few times and asking for help, but then I remembered how things ended and how easy he let Karen push me away. I couldn't return to him. I couldn't return to them. The fact that he never followed up with me after I left told it all. I was no longer significant to him. Karen saw me as simply another problem to address. It's funny though. You'd think being thrown out by my own family would have shattered me. But it really strengthened my resolve. I decided I wouldn't rely on anyone else anymore. I was tired of individuals failing to meet my expectations. I'd had enough of feeling like I owed anyone anything just to have a place to live. If I was going to get back on my feet, I was going to do it alone. So I started working harder, putting in extra hours at my job whenever I could. I cut back on everything. There was no need for new clothes, a night out, or anything else. It was difficult, but after a few months, I had saved enough money to finally acquire my own house. It wasn't glamorous, just a little one-room studio apartment on the outskirts of town, but it was mine. No more hopping from place to another. I will no longer rely on anyone else. I finally had a place of my own, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I remember the first night in my new flat. I didn't have much, only a mattress on the floor and a few boxes of belongings. But it felt like liberation. It was quiet. And for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, I didn't have to worry about being kicked out. I didn't have to walk on eggshells or tiptoe around anyone's emotions. It was only me, and that was plenty. Even though I was proud of myself for getting back on my feet, it did not alleviate the pain. I was still thinking about Lucas and Karen all the time. I thought about how easy they threw me out when they no longer needed me. How Karen's lies about me flirting with her and hanging out with dodgy people persuaded Lucas to kick me out without giving me a chance to defend myself. Even though I was improving, it still stung. What made things worse was that no one in my family reached out. Not my parents, nor my other siblings. It was as if I did not exist anymore. I believe Lucas gave everyone his version of the story, and I wasn't part of the image they were interested in. My parents were always concerned with keeping the peace, and I'm sure they believed it would be easier to let Lucas and Karen do whatever they wanted, rather than confront them about what had happened. But it still hurts, you know. It felt as if I had been wiped from their lives in that moment. I concentrated on moving forward, however. I didn't have time to sit around and feel sorry for myself. I had bills to pay, and the rent wouldn't pay itself. So I kept working and grinding, and things gradually improved. I received a promotion at work, which benefited my finances. I started decorating my small apartment to make it feel like home. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I was pleased with how far I'd come. Throughout this experience, I realized that you cannot rely on others to change your life. No one is coming to save you. And the individuals you think will always have your back may be the ones who bring you down the hardest. It's a difficult pill to swallow, but it is the truth. You must look out for yourself because when everything comes crumbling down, the only person you can rely on is yourself. Despite everything, I wished things had turned out differently with Lucas. I miss having a brother. I missed how things used to be before Karen entered the picture and turned everything upside down. But I knew I could not return to that. I could not forget how they treated me. I was not going to let them back into my life after what they had done. They made their decision, and I had to live with mine. I hadn't spoken to Lucas in over a year by the time I felt like I was back on track. Every now and then, he or Karen would text me to see how I was doing or to check in, but I never responded. I could not. Not after everything they put me through. I assumed they'd moved on too. They'd already had their baby, and I'm sure their lives were perfect without me. But deep inside, I knew something was wrong. You don't simply treat family like that and expect things to be well. I didn't realize it at the time, but the whole thing was going to come around later. And when it happened, it would change everything. I hadn't spoken to Lucas or Karen in approximately a year after moving into my own house. I'd done everything I could to put them behind me, but you can't simply delete family memories. Every now and then, I considered reaching out, but then I remembered how they threw me out like I was nothing. Even now, the notion of Lucas believing Karen's falsehoods made me sick. Then one day, I received a call. I was sitting at my work, half listening to a podcast, when my phone rang. I looked at the screen and, to my astonishment, it was Lucas. We hadn't spoken in about a year, so seeing his name come up gave me a strange feeling. Part of me wanted to ignore it and leave it on voicemail, but something prompted me to pick up, so I did. "Hello," I said, trying to sound neutral and not express any emotion. There was a pause on the other end before Lucas's voice came through, sounding strange. He didn't sound like the confident, well-groomed older brother I used to know. He sounded desperate. "Hey," he said. "It's me." "Yeah, I know," I said, not wanting to make things easier for him. Lucas paused, then sighed. "Look, I'm just going to cut to the chase. We need help. Karen and we're losing the house. The business went under, and we're getting evicted. We've got nowhere else to go." I could feel my heart rate increase. I hadn't heard from Lucas in over a year, and he called because he wanted something. It was almost comical what they had put me through. Part of me wanted to hang up right there and let them work it out for themselves. But the other part of me, well, that was complicated. "So, what do you want from me?" I inquired, attempting to keep my voice calm. "We were hoping." He paused, as if he couldn't believe what he was about to say. "We were hoping you'd let us stay with you, just for a few months, until we get back on our feet." I couldn't believe what I heard. My mind went back to that day, when I arrived home to find all of my belongings packed in the hallway, and Lucas just stood there as Karen lied about me flirting with her. And now they wanted to remain in my place. I laughed briefly, more out of incredulity. "You've got to be kidding me," I told you. "I know how it sounds," Lucas said immediately, as if he understood how silly it was. "But we've got 2 kids now, we don't have anywhere else to go. Please, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency." An emergency. So I was expected to forget about everything and help them since they were in trouble? Where was the energy when I needed a place to stay? When Karen threw me out for lying, and Lucas just stood there and did nothing? "Lucas, I don't know what to tell you," I murmured, my voice firm. "You kicked me out when I needed help. Remember that? You and Karen didn't care then. Why should I care now?" There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. And for a moment, I thought he'd hang up. But then he spoke again, this time with a softer tone, as if he was finally beginning to understand. "I know," he replied. "I know we screwed up. Karen, she was wrong. I was wrong for not standing up for you. I should have never let that happen. I should have had your back." Hearing him say that made me feel both satisfied and angry. It was the apology I had been waiting for, but it also felt too late, as if it no longer mattered. The damage had already been done. What use was an apology now, after all this time? "I needed you, Lucas," I replied, my voice beginning to crack. "I needed my brother, and you let her lie about me. You let her make me out to be some kind of freak, like I was flirting with her. You believed her over me." "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I really am. But right now we're desperate. We don't have anyone else to turn to. I'm asking you as your brother. Please, can we stay with you?" I sat there, phone clamped to my ear, trying to think of what to say. A part of me wanted to tell him to shove it and let him deal with the consequences of his actions. But another part of me, perhaps the bit that cared about family despite everything, was torn. I had been through hell before they kicked me out. But did it mean I had to kick them even while they were down? Was it my obligation to be the greater person in this situation? "I need some time to think about it," I finally admitted, my voice tight. "I understand," Lucas said, happy that I had not slammed the door in his face just yet. "Take as much time as you need. I'm really sorry for everything, and I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone. A part of me wanted to giggle at the comedy of the situation. They kicked me out without hesitation, and now they begged me for a place to remain. It felt like a twisted karmic joke. But the truth was that I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to be that person that harbors grudges indefinitely. However, I did not want to be walked all over again. If I let them stay, will they take advantage of me again? Or will this be the moment when we all mature and move on from what happened? I pondered about it for several days. My phone started buzzing with texts from Lucas, warning me that they didn't have much time until they had to leave their residence. My parents even got involved, sending me guilt-inducing messages about how family is strong and how I should let go of past mistakes. But it wasn't so easy. Family bonds work best when both parties genuinely care about each other. And for a long time, it seemed like I was the only one who cared. Update 1. I sat with the phone in my hand, expecting some sort of supernatural response. After several days of deliberation, I finally called Lucas back. He didn't answer immediately away, so I left him a message informing him that I had made my decision and that he may contact me back whenever he had the chance. A part of me felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted. But the other part was just nervous, as if whatever happened next would either be a complete disaster or something that would permanently alter our relationship. I wasn't sure which way things would go, but I had to stick to my decision. About an hour later, Lucas called me back. His voice seemed strained, as if he'd been holding his breath since I left the message. "So, what's your decision?" he inquired, without bothering with small talk. I took a deep breath. "Look, Lucas, I thought about it a lot," I began, attempting to remain cool despite the fact that my heart was racing. "And I can't let you and Karen stay with me." There was stillness on the other line, as if he wasn't sure he'd heard me correctly. "Wait, what? You're serious?" he finally asked, sounding surprised rather than outraged. "After everything?" I shot back, my voice becoming sharper. "You mean after you kicked me out of your house with no warning based on lies Karen made up? You threw me out, Lucas. I had nowhere to go. So yeah, I'm serious." I could hear him breathing on the other end, as if he was trying to figure out how to react without exploding out. "I told you I was sorry for that. We were under a lot of stress. Karen was pregnant, and things were just complicated." "Complicated?" I asked, my irritation bubbling up. "You believed lies about me flirting with your wife and hanging out with drug dealers. You didn't even give me a chance to defend myself. And now, because things are bad for you, I'm supposed to just forget about all that?" "I'm not asking you to forget," Lucas added, his voice becoming increasingly urgent. "I'm asking you to help us. We've got kids now. This isn't just about me or Karen. We're your family." I felt a tinge of shame, but I wasn't about to back down. Not after what I'd gone through. "Family? You weren't thinking about family when you threw me out. You weren't thinking about family when you let Karen lie about me. I had to figure it out on my own, Lucas. Now it's your turn." There was another prolonged silence. I could hear the frustration in his breathing again, but he did not argue. He knew I was correct. "Look," I continued, relaxing my tone slightly. "I'm not saying I don't care, but I can't let you stay with me. I've worked hard to rebuild my life, and I'm finally in a good place. I can't let you and Karen come in and mess that up again. You understand that, right?" "Yeah," Lucas mumbled. "I get it." It wasn't the answer he wanted, but I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to allow him guilt-trip me into giving in. I'd traveled too far for that. "I'll help in other ways," I said, feeling compelled to throw him something. "I'll help you find resources or places you can stay, but my home, that's off limits." There was a long hush on the other end, and for a while I assumed Lucas had hung up. But then he exhaled deeply, as if he'd finally accepted it. "Okay," he replied, his voice softer now. "I understand. I'm not happy about it, but I understand." I let out a breath that I hadn't realized I was holding. It was difficult to say no to my own brother, but I had to prioritize my own safety. If I accepted him and Karen back into my life in that way, I knew things would return to normal, and I couldn't bear it. "I really do hope things get better for you guys," I replied, attempting to leave the talk on a more positive note. "I'm sorry things are so hard right now." "Yeah, me too," Lucas mumbled. "Thanks for whatever help you can give." We exchanged awkward goodbyes, and that was that. I hung up the phone and sat there for a minute to comprehend everything. I'd said no. For the first time in my life, I stood up to my own family, and it felt odd. Half of me felt pleased, while another half was unhappy. I didn't enjoy the notion of being apart from Lucas indefinitely, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I had to draw a line someplace. Over the next few days I kept thinking about that conversation and replaying it in my mind. I wasn't sure if Lucas was upset with me or if he understood where I was coming from, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to allow myself be guilted into doing something I wasn't comfortable with. My parents, of course, found out about the situation and attempted to intervene with their family sticks-together routine. They couldn't believe I answered no, especially after I recounted what had happened to Lucas and Karen. It's as if they refused to see the wider picture. "You should have helped them," my mother reminded me during one of our phone conversations. "They're struggling, and you've always been the one to help. This isn't like you." That final part hurt a little. Perhaps it wasn't typical of me, but that could have been intentional. I was always the one who went above and above for my family, no matter how they treated me. But that is precisely why I had to say no this time. I wasn't the same person as before. I'd grown and learned to set boundaries, and this was one of them. "I'm sorry, Mom," I murmured, attempting to remain cool. "But I've got to put myself first for once. Lucas and Karen can figure it out." My folks didn't get it, which didn't surprise me. They were not the only ones who had been booted out and forced to fend for themselves. They were not the ones who had to reconstruct everything from scratch. I was, and I was not going to let anyone make me feel terrible about safeguarding everything I had fought so hard to create. After then, everything became quiet for a bit. I hadn't heard anything from Lucas or Karen, which was great with me. They had their own issues to cope with, while I had mine. I assisted them in finding a temporary refuge, and that was the last I heard from them. No more desperate calls, no more guilt-inducing texts. My friend's sister accused me of being the father of her baby, and sued me for emotional distress. When my lawyer came in, she turned pale. My friend Ryan has a sister named Laura. I've known them both for several years. We grew up in the same neighborhood and occasionally hung out, but nothing important happened. Laura had a unique personality. I don't want to sound nasty, but she had some mental health issues. I don't know all the specifics, and it wasn't my business. Ryan never mentioned it, and I didn't ask, but everyone knew Laura faced difficulties. Laura approached me unexpectedly about a year ago, informing me that she was pregnant. Okay, cool, right? Except for one small detail. She stated that I was the father. At that point, I swear my brain had short-circuited. I was like, wait, what? Let me clarify. I've never embraced Laura or been close with her, not even once. So when she came at me with this outrageous charge, I couldn't process it. I told her straight up, "Laura, I don't know what you're talking about, but there's no way I'm the father. We've never been close like that." She simply kept saying it over and again, as if I was going to magically recall a night that never happened. It was strange, to say the least. I tried to remain calm, thinking that maybe this was part of her mental health issues, but deep down, I was terrified. This is where things began to spiral out of control. Laura refused to have a prenatal paternity test. I was sitting there thinking, if you're so sure it's my kid, why don't you just take the test and prove it? But she wouldn't move. She continued saying things like, "You need to be there for your child, and you're abandoning us before the baby's even born." It was guilt trip territory, and I wasn't buying it. I made it obvious that if she didn't take the test, I wouldn't sign anything. I was not about to become legally bound to a child who wasn't mine. Simple, right? I assumed that would be the end of it. Boy, was I mistaken. Cue the familial drama. My parents discovered out some weeks later. I love my parents, but they have these old views. They were devastated as soon as they learned of the situation. Completely lost it. They were calling me names, accusing me of being a deadbeat and a shame. I was standing there, trying to say something, but they weren't listening. I told them, "Mom, Dad, this isn't my kid. Laura's just making stuff up." But they wouldn't listen. It was as if they couldn't get over the fact that I was responsible for this infant. There were a lot of ugly arguments following that. Things were spoken that I probably cannot take back. And I'm still upset about it. Even though I kept telling them it wasn't my child. My parents insisted on me doing the right thing, and taking on the role of father. It did not matter to them. In their opinion, I was already guilty. They claimed they did not raise me to be a deadbeat and could not believe I would deprive my own child. This is where things become even crazier. I wasn't even in the same state when Laura became pregnant. That's correct. She had been staying with a friend for a month when she allegedly conceived. When I brought this up with my parents, they simply dismissed it, stating, "People make mistakes." Well, this wasn't a mistake. This was a full-fledged accusation that could ruin my life. Fast forward to around 6 months into Laura's pregnancy. By this point, the entire family had turned on me. Every family dinner, phone call and text was about how I needed to man up and accept responsibility for this baby. I was losing my mind. It was as if I were in a nightmare. Regardless of what I said or did, no one believed me. Fortunately, most of my pals were on my side. But a few of them began to question things such as, "Are you sure, man? Maybe you don't remember something." Finally, my parents dropped the biggest bombshell on me. If I didn't stand up and behave like a parent, they were removing me from their lives, disowning me, and kicking me out. At first, I assumed they were joking, but they were quite serious. They stated unequivocally that if I did not agree to this, I would be kicked out of the family. They disowned me after I refused to cave. Let me tell you, it stung. I was irritated, puzzled, and hurt. These were the people who reared me and were meant to have my back, yet they chose to believe someone else over me. My own family discarded me as if I didn't matter. It was horrible. Things became much stranger when the baby was born. My mother was present at the hospital, playing the role of proud grandmother. I didn't know until later. Laura refused to take the paternity test, so I had to go through certain legal procedures to get it completed. When the findings arrived, guess what? Not my child. There was a 0% possibility I was the father. As soon as I held that paper in my hands, I felt a rush of relief and rage. I sent the results to my parents, hoping they'd finally realize the reality. They'll realize they were mistaken, and everything will return to normal. Nope. Instead, they began bombarding my phone with apologies, money offers, and pleadings for forgiveness. My father even mailed me a few hundred, as if that would solve the problem. But here's the deal. I kept the money. Yes, I took it. I felt as if they owed me for everything they had put me through. But will you forgive them? No way. I made it clear that if they were willing to disown me over something like this, I was not going to risk being betrayed again. Most of my friends supported me, but a few, including my therapist, began suggesting things like, "Maybe you should give them another chance. They're your parents after all." I understand. I really do. But how do you forgive someone who was willing to cast you away so easily? How can you trust someone who believed a lie about their own child? That's where I am now. I'm torn between knowing I didn't do anything wrong and wondering if I should even try to make things right with my family. But every time I think about it, I recall how swiftly they turned on me, and I can't get rid of the sensation that they let me down when I needed them most. Okay, so with everything that happened with my parents and Laura's baby drama, you'd think things would settle down, right? Nope. Life had different plans for me. If anything, the situation only worsened. You'd think confirming that I wasn't the father would have been the end of it. But I wish it were that simple. It turns out that when people refuse to confess their mistakes, they will go to any length to avoid accepting responsibility. When the paternity test results revealed that I was not the father, I thought, all right, now my parents will realize they were wrong, and maybe things can get back to normal. But instead of the relaxation I expected, things became much more convoluted. First and foremost, Laura utterly lost it. She began spreading tales throughout town that I had tampered with or faked the test. Yeah, you read that correctly. In her perspective, I had successfully persuaded a whole lab to rig the data in my favor. How would I even do that? I'm simply a regular guy, not some genius who understands how to manipulate DNA tests. Laura, however, was not hearing anything. She was dead focused on making me the antagonist in her plot. She went around telling everyone that I was abandoning her and the kid, that I had deceived everyone into believing I wasn't the father. It made no sense, but it didn't matter. People began to believe her. Small-town tales traveled quickly, and soon I was getting filthy stares at the grocery store, as if I were some kind of slime. I even had others confront me, asking why I wasn't stepping up to care for my child. It was irritating. I had test results that proved I wasn't the father, but no one seemed to care. Laura was out there playing the victim, and I was being accused for something I had no involvement in. I'd never felt more helpless in my life. It's one thing when your family turns against you, but when the entire community believes you're the evil guy, it's a different story. My parents were still trying to be kind, but it was evident they had no idea how to handle the matter either. My mother kept phoning, leaving long, tearful voicemails about how she simply wanted her family back together. She didn't even acknowledge what had occurred. She just wanted to sweep everything under the rug as if nothing had ever happened. She even invited me over for supper, as if it would suddenly repair all the damage they'd done. It was more than just awkward. It was insulting. After everything they had put me through, they assumed a few family meals and fake smiles would make things better. There was no apology or acknowledgement of how severely they had messed up. Just, let's move on. It was as if they had no idea how much trust they had broken. And the point is, once trust has been lost, it cannot be repaired with a dinner and a hug. It takes real work and effort to repair, and they were unwilling to accept their mistakes. The kicker came when my father attempted to bribe me. He simply sent me an email offering to buy me a new automobile if I would return to the family. Like what? They believed they could purchase my forgiveness? It was so out of sync with reality that I had no idea how to respond. I gazed at the email for a moment, trying to figure out if it was a cruel joke. But, nope. My father was serious. I did not respond. I could not. What would you say to anything like that? They were unconcerned about fixing things properly. They simply wanted me back into their lives because it was convenient for them. The fact that they thought throwing money at me would solve things demonstrated how little they understood what they had done. The worst part came later, when I discovered Laura had begun reaching out to people I knew, attempting to drag them into her drama. She even phoned my ex-girlfriend Claire, attempting to persuade her that I was a bad guy who had abandoned his child. Sam and I hadn't spoken in years, but I received a text from her saying, "We need to talk." At first, I had no idea what she was talking about, but when she explained that Laura had been contacting her, attempting to stir up old drama, I nearly lost it. I contacted Laura and ordered her to stop. I was done with the games and the lies, and I was not going to let her drag my friends and ex-partners into her mess. But she simply laughed and hung up on me. It was like speaking to a wall. She was so engrossed in her fantasy world that nothing I said got through to her. At this point, I was seriously considering consulting a lawyer. I didn't want to go that far. But what option did I have? Laura was out here damaging my reputation, my parents were encouraging her actions, and I felt as if I had no one on my side. My closest friends did support me, but they had no idea how horrible things had gotten. Finally, I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in a constant state of stress, waiting for the next rumor or insane accusation to come my way. I determined to cut all ties, not only with Laura, but also with my parents. It was not easy. It sucked. But I realized I couldn't keep letting them pull me down. I sent my folks a long email explaining everything. I felt deceived, they had failed me, and I couldn't trust them anymore. I did not sugarcoat anything. I told them openly that I wasn't ready to forgive them and didn't know if I ever would be. I informed them that if they wanted to have a future connection with me, they needed to first apologize and accept responsibility for their acts. No more pretending that everything was all right. No more sweeping things under the rug. I blocked Laura on everything. I couldn't take her manipulations anymore. She was not my concern, and I was not going to let her drag me further into her mess. I even had to inform her brother Ryan that I would be unable to spend time with his family for the time being. That was difficult because Ryan has always been a good buddy, but I needed to prioritize my personal well-being. I took them off a few months ago, and it's been a relief. Sure, there are days when I feel guilty or question myself, but ultimately, I believe I made the correct decision. Even when it's difficult, you have to walk away from situations. Yes, it is chaotic and complicated, but at least I am no longer constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next calamity to strike. I can now breathe again. But dude, if you had told me a year ago that this is where I'd wind up, I would not have believed you. Life is funny like that, I suppose. Update 1. Okay, so this is where things get more crazier. I believed cutting ties with Laura and my parents would put an end to the insanity. I figured that if I eliminated them from my life, everything would calm down, and I could move on. Unfortunately, things do not always go as planned. Cutting them off was only the start of a whole new disaster. A few weeks after I sent that email to my parents and blocked Laura, I received an unexpected contact from an old high school acquaintance named Jason. We hadn't spoken in years, yet out of nowhere he asks whether I'm okay. At first I think, okay, that's random. But then he tells me that my parents contacted him. Now Jason and I were never really close, so my parents contacting him was a massive red flag. Apparently, they'd been going around asking individuals to speak with me on their behalf. I'm talking about old friends, distant relatives, and even individuals I hardly know. They were informing everyone that I was in a difficult situation and that they were concerned about me. They seemed to be trying to make me appear unstable, and the worst part? They framed the entire situation as if I was the one who needed to apologize for cutting them off. Jason was okay about it. He was aware of what was going on and wanted to warn me. But it did not end there. Over the next several days, I began receiving messages from a wide range of people. People I hadn't spoken to in years, and only met a few times. They were all saying the same thing. "Your parents are really worried about you," or, "You should give them another chance." That was insane. They had convinced everyone that I was the evil guy in this situation, that I had gotten off track and needed to make amends. I could not believe it. I was just attempting to go on with my life when my parents launched a full-fledged public relations operation to make me look like the villain. The final straw came when they contacted my employer. Yes, you heard that correctly. My parents called my employer. I'm not sure how they got the number, but they found my boss's contact information and called the office, telling him they were worried about me and that I wasn't in the appropriate mindset. Can you imagine how embarrassing that was? My supervisor called me into his office one day, appearing serious, and asked whether everything was fine at home. I was stunned. I wasn't sure what to say at first. What do you respond when your boss asks if your parents believe you've gone off the deep end? I described the entire issue to him, and fortunately, he was really understanding. He apologized for bringing it up, but the harm had already been done. My own parents were out there, attempting to interfere with my job. It felt like they were out to ruin everything for me, simply because I refused to conform to their will. After that, I had no choice. I proceeded to see a lawyer, and began the process of obtaining a restraining order against them. I didn't want to go that far. But what option did I have? They were interfering with my profession, friendships, and peace of mind. I needed to defend myself, even if it meant formally cutting them off. The process was time-consuming and demanding, with court dates, paperwork, and a lot of anxiety. But at the same time, I felt a strange sensation of satisfaction, as if I had finally taken control of the situation. No more letting them infiltrate every aspect of my existence. No more allowing them to twist the narrative. Of course, when they learned about the restraining order, all hell broke out. My mother sent me a long, guilt-ridden email about how she never expected her own son to do this, and how families are supposed to keep together no matter what. She kept accusing me of ripping the family apart and inflicting all of the sorrow. This was textbook manipulation. But I did not bite. I did not respond. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but things only got worse before they improved. One day, I returned home from work to find my car had been vandalized. Someone had typed the word liar into the side of it. I had no confirmation it was my parents, but really, who else could it be? Except for a few close acquaintances, I'd kept the restraining order a secret. My parents were the only ones with a reason to do anything like that. It was as if they couldn't tolerate losing control and had to lash out in whatever way they could. I filed a police report, but nothing happened. Just another reminder that even when you attempt to do things correctly, the people who are meant to love you the most can become your deadliest adversaries. I began parking my car at a friend's house after that, simply to be safe. I couldn't take any more chances. I also installed security cameras throughout my flat in case they tried anything else. I felt like I was in a perpetual state of paranoia, waiting for the next shoe to drop. But slowly, things began to settle down. The restraining order was granted, and my parents were no longer permitted to contact me or visit my house or employment. It took a great weight off my shoulders. I could finally breathe after what seemed like an eternity. It has been a few months, and I am still picking up the pieces. I had to perform a lot of damage control with my friends and coworkers, explaining the entire issue and ensuring they understood the truth. The majority of them were supportive, but a few were suspicious, asking, "Are you sure your parents would really go that far?" I got it. It's difficult to believe, but if you've been through it, you know how far some individuals will go when they feel they've lost control. Looking back, I never anticipated things would become so horrible. It's incredible how quickly relatives can turn against you when you refuse to play by their rules. But I've learned something valuable from all of this. You cannot let anyone, including your family, determine how you spend your life. Sometimes you have to make the difficult decision to walk away, even if it hurts. I'm not sure what the future holds for me and my parents. Perhaps one day they will recognize what they did and genuinely apologize. Perhaps not. In any case, I'm tired of allowing them to dictate my life. I have my own road to take, and I'm not looking back. Update 2. Okay, so this is where things take a turn. I expected things to calm down once I had the restraining order and began rebuilding my life. However, life had other plans. Just when I was starting to feel like I could breathe again, my parents devised a new technique to torment me. This time there wasn't any direct touch. It wasn't damaging my automobile or sending emails. No, this was an entirely different level of messed up. One day, I was sitting at home, minding my own business, when I received a letter in the mail. Nothing unusual about that, right? Except that this letter is from a lawyer. At first I assumed it was related to the restraining order. Perhaps some last paperwork. But no, it was a lawsuit. My own parents sued me. For what, you ask? Emotional anguish. I couldn't believe all I was reading. They were suing me for cutting them off, claiming that my actions had caused them significant mental distress, and that they were entitled to compensation. They even claimed I had estranged them from the rest of the family, which was completely false because they isolated me, not the other way around. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the letter, trying to figure out what was happening. Seriously, who does that? Who sues their own child because they are angry that they were cut off? I did not know what to do. Part of me wanted to chuckle at how silly everything was, but another part of me was extremely freaked out. It wasn't simply family drama anymore. This was legal, and things were about to get very ugly. I called my lawyer right away. I couldn't handle this alone. She was as astonished as I was. She'd seen a lot of difficult family situations, but suing your own child for mental distress, that was novel even for her. We went over the specifics of the complaint, and while the majority of it was obviously false, I knew we couldn't just dismiss it. They were serious, so I had to fight back. The following few weeks were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and tension. I had to assemble all of the proof of what had happened, the paternity test results, the restraining order, and the harassment I had been subjected to. My lawyer was convinced we would win, but it felt weird that it had come to this. My own parents were dragging me through the mud in court simply because I refused to let them dominate me anymore. But here's the deal, they did not stop with simply the lawsuit. Oh no, they had to go a step further. They began reaching out to other family members in an attempt to turn them against me. I began receiving messages from relatives, uncles and cousins, people I hadn't heard from in years. They were all suggesting the same thing. Why don't you just reconcile with your parents? You are being selfish if you believe that family is everything. It was as if they had been brainwashed into believing I was the villain in all of this. I was enraged, not only at my parents, but at the entire scenario. It seemed like no matter what I did, or how hard I tried to defend myself, they always found a way to twist the story and make me appear like the bad person. How do you explain to someone who has only heard one side of the story that your parents are suing you for emotional distress because you set boundaries? It came to the point where I had to cut off more people. I blocked family members, unfriended folks on social media, and just cut all ties to that aspect of my life. It wasn't that I didn't care about them, I did. But I couldn't keep justifying myself to folks who'd already made up their minds. It was exhausting, and I was done justifying my judgments to those who refused to understand the broader picture. Eventually, the court date arrived. I arrived with my lawyer, ready for whatever bullshit they would throw at me. And let me tell you, it was a circus. My parents had a full sob story prepared about how they'd always been there for me, how they tried to support me through difficult times, and how I'd cruelly cut them off for no reason. They framed themselves as the victims in all of this, which was really astounding given that they were the ones who disowned me in the first place. But my lawyer wouldn't have it. She dismantled their claims piece by piece, presenting the judge with evidence of their harassment, the restraining order, the paternity test, everything. It was horrible. And at the conclusion, it was clear that the court did not believe their story. The judge ruled in my favor. Obviously, the lawsuit was dismissed, and my parents were compelled to pay my legal expenses, which was a minor triumph in the larger scheme of things. But despite winning, it didn't seem like a victory. I felt like I had just gotten out of a nightmare, and there was still so much debris to deal with. Following the case, my parents made one final attempt to re-enter my life. They sent me a long emotional letter in which they apologized for everything, expressed their desire to make things right, and stated that they could not take the thought of losing me. It was the same old guilt-tripping bullshit they'd been doing from the beginning. I honestly didn't answer. I had already made a decision. I was not going back. There's just so much someone can take before they have to walk away permanently. And yes, it hurt. Cutting off your family is difficult, regardless of how bad things get. However, sometimes it is vital for your own sanity. I couldn't keep being dragged into their chaos. Regardless of how much they claimed to love me, their concept of love was toxic, and I was not going to let it poison my life any longer. So, that's where I am now. The case is behind me, the restraining order remains in effect, and I am moving forward. It hasn't been easy, but I'm learning to live without the noise and the continual worry of wondering when the next calamity would strike. For the first time in a long time, I believe I have some control over my life, which feels pretty damn wonderful. I'm not sure what the future holds. Maybe one day things will change, or maybe not. But right now, I'm concentrating on myself, on restoring the elements of my life that they attempted to destroy. It has been a hard journey, but I am finally beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Update 3. Okay, so if you've been following along thus far, you'd think that with the lawsuit and the restraining order, the crazy would be over. But nah. My family found a method to surprise me one final time. And this one really made me shake my head since I didn't believe they could get any lower. But, here we are. Things began to quiet down a few months after the court ruled in my favor. I had severed links with everyone, causing me worry, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, I was able to concentrate on reconstructing my life. There are no random messages from old pals or letters from lawyers, only peace. Or so I thought. One day, I was out running errands, just doing usual things like grocery shopping, when I ran into my cousin Nicole. Nicole and I hadn't chatted much throughout all of this upheaval. We weren't very close growing up, but we always got along. So when I saw her, I thought, why not say hello? We ended up conversing for a while, and at first it seemed very normal, catching up on life, work, and the usual stuff. But then she suddenly says, "Hey, did you hear what your parents are planning?" I froze. Planning? I inquired, suddenly experiencing that old pit in my gut. Nicole looked a little uneasy, as if she wasn't sure if she should even tell me, but she groaned and continued. "Yeah, they're throwing a big family reunion next month. Apparently they've been telling everyone they're hoping it'll be a reconciliation thing between you and them." I could not believe it. They were genuinely organizing an ambush reunion to push me back into the family. I asked Nicole for additional information, and it turned out that they were inviting everyone. Distant cousins, family friends, and individuals I hadn't seen in years. What's the kicker? They'd been telling everyone I'd be there, as if I was part of the plan. I was infuriated. I had not agreed to anything, and now they were preparing to make me seem terrible if I did not come up. It was another typical tactic by my parents: manipulate the situation, make me look like the villain, and guilt-trip me into doing what they wanted. I thanked Nicole for informing me and told her straight up that I was not attending. She understood, but she seemed to be divided, as if she was buying into my parents' story that all they wanted to do was heal things. I could see it on her face. She urged me to go and make things right. But after what they'd done, there was no way I was going to fall into their trap. That night, I went home and contemplated my options. I knew I wasn't going to the reunion, but a part of me felt compelled to say something. I couldn't simply ignore this. So I decided to send one final mail to my parents, outlining everything once and for all. The next morning, I got down to send them an email. It wasn't long, but it was straightforward. I explained that I was aware of the reunion, but would not be attending. I made it obvious that I did not want to participate in any coerced reconciliation, particularly in front of a large crowd. I reminded them that if they truly cared about resolving things, they needed to start by respecting my boundaries. There was nothing more to discuss until they could do that. I wasn't expecting a reaction, and frankly, I didn't need one. I simply needed to correct the record one last time. But of course, my parents could not simply let it go. A few days later, my father contacted me. I didn't answer, but he left a long rambling voicemail about how I was pulling the family apart and how this reunion was supposed to be a new beginning for all of us. He even attempted to guilt me by adding, "Your grandparents would be so disappointed in how you're handling this." That voicemail struck me hard, not because I believed it, but because it reminded me of all the times my parents used guilt and manipulation to get their way. They'd play any card they could to make me feel like I was the problem, including pulling my grandparents into it, who had always been supportive of me. It was as if they couldn't accept that they, too, might need to take a long, hard look at themselves. I did not respond to the voicemail. What was the point? I had said my piece, and I was not going to let them drag me back into their drama. But it doesn't mean it didn't bother me for days thereafter. I kept thinking about the reunion and all of the family who will be there, and I wondered if I was simply refusing to make peace. I wondered if many of them knew the whole story, or if they were only hearing the warped version my parents were telling. After the reunion, I didn't hear from my parents. I saw some images on Facebook, happy grins, family hugs, the entire thing. My parents were smiling, as if nothing was wrong, as if they hadn't spent the last year attempting to wreck my life. It felt strange seeing them pretending everything was wonderful, but I suppose they were always brilliant at pretending. A few weeks later, I ran into Nicole again, and she told me how awful the reunion had been. Apparently many people expected me to arrive, and when I didn't, there were some awkward talks. My parents tried to explain my absence, but Nicole reported it didn't go well. A few relatives even wondered why I wasn't there and why my parents hadn't been more open about the situation. I guess not everyone believed their narrative after all. And I think that's where things stand right now. I've managed to detach myself from the drama, but I know it's always present, just beneath the surface. My parents are unlikely to admit their mistakes, and I understand it. I can't change them. But I can defend myself, continue to create my life without their influence, and focus on the individuals who truly care about me. It's been a long path, and I'm not going to lie. It still hurts occasionally. It's not easy to cut off from your family, and there are days when I question if I made the right decision. But deep down, I knew I needed to. I had to prioritize myself, my mental health, and my own future over the toxic loop they were attempting to drag me into. So, this is the end of the wild ride. Maybe one day things will change, or maybe not. In any case, I'm tired of letting my family dictate how I live my life. I've got my own road to follow. And for the first time in a long time, I'm doing things my way. My ex-wife left me for a better man. He cheated, she lost everything, and now they're begging for help while I earn over $500,000 a year. I recall the precise moment Lily chose to end our marriage. She sat at the kitchen table, mindlessly browsing through her phone. I had just walked in from work, ready to drop my bag and relax, when she looked up and casually remarked, "Derek, I want a divorce." There was no preparation, no softening of the blow, just a brutal, cruel statement delivered as if she were commenting on the weather. I hesitated for a second, unsure whether I had heard her correctly. "Excuse me?" I inquired, my voice composed despite the tempest boiling within me. "I said, I want a divorce," she repeated, her tone implying that I was too sluggish to understand the first time. I should have been outraged, maybe even devastated. Instead, I was astounded by her chutzpah. Divorce, after everything we had gone through together. And the reason is what struck me the hardest. "I can't keep living like this," she said, crossing her arms. "I need someone who actually works, who contributes. This isn't the life I signed up for." I hadn't realized it. Does not work? I wanted to laugh, but I maintained my cool. For years I'd built my profession from the ground up, earning a six-figure salary and preparing us for a future that most people could only dream about. But Lily didn't bother asking about my work. Never showed any interest in how I made money. I suppose she assumed I was just coasting along, barely getting by. I leaned against the counter and studied her. She seemed so sure of herself, so certain that she was making the correct decision. "All right," I replied calmly, laying my suitcase down. She tilted her head in surprise. "All right?" "Yes, Lily. If you want a divorce, I won't stop you." I caught a glimpse of concern on her face, but it was quickly replaced by the smug, self-assured look I'd gotten accustomed to. "Good, because I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll need to move out by the end of the month. Move out of my house." This woman's nerve was almost funny, but I did not protest. If she wanted me to leave, I would. At least for the time being. "Fair enough," I said, turning to go upstairs. I could feel her gaze on me, waiting for me to scream, beg or argue, but I offered her nothing. In the seclusion of our bedroom, I perched on the edge of the bed and processed the situation. This was not about divorce. This was about power. Lily wanted to feel in control and present me as the failure in our relationship. And perhaps she believed she could persuade me to fight for her, begging for a chance to win her back. But she didn't know me as well as she assumed. The days that followed were a masterclass in passive-aggressive behavior. Lily immediately had a lot to say about everything, even how I folded the clothes and how I spent my evenings. She ridiculed my hobbies, routines, and even how I brewed my coffee. It seemed as if she was attempting to justify her decision by making me the villain. And then there was Ethan, my self-proclaimed best friend. At first I didn't notice how frequently she said his name. "Ethan said this," or "Ethan suggested that," but it was soon evident to her that he was more than simply a buddy. I did not confront her. I wasn't prepared to reveal my hand. Instead, I let her believe she was in control. I led her to believe that I was the passive, clueless husband who couldn't see what was going on right in front of his eyes. One evening, as I was packing a suitcase with a few necessities, Lily leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed and a sneer on her lips. "So, have you figured out where you're going to stay?" she inquired, her tone condescending. I shut the bag and turned to face her. "Don't worry about me, Lily, I'll be fine." She huffed, evidently upset by my cool manner. "Good, because Ethan and I are planning a dinner party here next weekend. It would be awkward if you were still hanging around." "A dinner party? In my house? With my best friend?" The audacity was nearly impressive. "Don't worry," I reassured, shouldering the bag. "I'll be gone long before then." As I moved past her, I noticed her smug look. She believed she had won. She assumed I was slinking away in defeat. But Lily didn't realize she had just handed me the match to light the fuse. If she wanted to burn everything down, I'd let her. And then I'd watch the flames consume both her and Ethan. Sometimes shouting or fighting isn't the greatest way to exact revenge. It's silent. It requires patience. It is allowing the other person to dig their own grave while you silently prepare to bury them in it. And trust me, I was only getting started. Betrayal is a pernicious thing. It makes no grand entrance or display of fireworks. No, it slips in silently, disguised as casual chats and harmless gestures, until one day you wake up to discover that everything you believed was solid has been chipped away. Lily's request for a divorce was the first crack. What followed was a slow breakdown of what I thought I knew about her and Ethan. Yes, Ethan was my best friend, or at least the man who had held that position for many years. I should have seen it coming, but hindsight can be terrible. Initially it was subtle. Lily began invoking Ethan's name more frequently than normal. "Ethan said this," or "Ethan recommended that," she'd casually say during supper. I would nod, not thinking much about it. After all, he was a good friend to both of us. But as the weeks passed, his name came up in our chats more regularly, and with a warmth that made my stomach churn. The first real red flag appeared on a Saturday afternoon. Lily had just returned from one of her meals with Ethan. She was laughing, and her cheeks flushed in a manner I hadn't seen in years. When I inquired what was hilarious, she dismissed me with, "Oh, it's just something Ethan said. You wouldn't get it." I wouldn't get it? When did I start peering in on our marriage from the outside? The solution, I realized, came much earlier than I'd like to admit. I started to notice more. She'd type the texts with a cheeky smirk before hastily locking her phone. She would suddenly dress up more when she had arrangements with Ethan. The explanations that they were only pals or that I was overthinking things. Overthinking. That is the preferred word of any guilty individual attempting to transfer the blame. I still didn't confront her, however. What could have been the point? She'd merely deny it and spin the story to make me appear like the anxious husband who couldn't deal with her having male pals. So I let her believe I was blind, too absorbed with my own affairs to watch hers unraveling. The big blow came when Ethan showed up at my house unexpectedly. I was in the process of packing my life into luggage, as Lily had sweetly requested, when I heard the doorbell. I opened it and was greeted by Ethan's ever-confident grin. He walked in without waiting for an invitation. "Derek, my man," he continued, as if we were still best of friends. "How's it going?" I stared at him, every ounce of patience in my body tested. "What do you want, Ethan?" I inquired, keeping my voice level. He leaned against the wall, carefree and charming. "Just checking in. Lily told me you were moving out, and I thought I'd see if you needed any help." Assistance. From the man who was literally moving into my life. The audacity was nearly astounding. "I've got it handled," I said curtly, returning to my packing. Ethan lingered, and when I looked over, I noticed the wheels churning in his head. He wasn't simply checking in. He was come to make his point and set his claim. "Listen," he began, his voice taking on a tone he undoubtedly felt was genuine. "I know this must be hard for you, but things happen." "Things happen," I repeated, turning to face him directly. I took a hesitant step forward, forcing him to meet my gaze. "Yeah, Ethan. Things do happen, and sometimes they come back to bite you." He faltered for the first time. The arrogant sneer faded, replaced by something almost like uncertainty. I did not wait for him to recover. I returned to my suitcase, clearly dismissing him. "You've always been a cool guy, Derek," he added nervously before going to the door. "No hard feelings, right?" I did not respond. Silence is a strong tool, especially when someone is yearning for a response. Ethan went without saying anything else, and as his car drove away, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That night, as I slept in the bed that would soon be mine, I relived the events of the previous few months, missed signals, lies, and betrayal. I could have gotten outraged, confronted them both, and demanded answers. But what would this accomplish? They'd already dismissed me as irrelevant, a footnote in their story. What they didn't comprehend was that I wasn't the passive, naive husband they assumed I was. I had been paying attention, making mental notes, and strategizing my future actions. If Lily and Ethan thought they could walk off into the sunset together without consequences, they were in for a shocking awakening. Because betrayal continues even when the truth is revealed. No, that's when the actual game starts. And as far as I was concerned, this was a game I completely expected to win. Divorce. It's a small word for something so disorganized. It indicates closure, a straightforward conclusion to a convoluted story. But when Lily and I walked into that courtroom, I recognized this was not the end. For her, it was a victory lap, a celebration of what she saw as an enhancement. She arrived prepared to impress, in a fitted outfit that exuded refinement and a confident smile that made my stomach churn. Ethan was not far behind her, hovering like a shadow. He did not enter the courtroom, of course, he would not dare. But the very fact that he was present told me everything I needed to know. Lily wasn't simply divorcing me. She proudly displayed her betrayal. "Derek, let's not drag this out," she urged as we sat across from each other at the negotiating table. "I don't want this to be harder than it needs to be. It's harder than it should be." The irony was not lost on me. She had already made things difficult by stomping on years of marriage as if it were a worn-out rug that she couldn't wait to replace. "I don't plan to," I said calmly, meeting her eyes without flinching. The lawyer outlined the terms. She wanted the house, some furnishings, and a portion of what she believed to be my limited savings. She presumably expected me to resist her, perhaps even plead for a better bargain, but I didn't flinch. I agreed to all terms and signed each form without hesitation. Lily glanced at me, puzzled. "You're okay with all this?" "Why wouldn't I be?" I inquired, keeping my voice light. "It's just stuff, Lily. You can have it." I caught a glimpse of doubt in her expression, but she soon disguised it with a smug smile. She thought she had won, that she was leaving with everything important. What she didn't realize was that the house was not mine to begin with. It was a rental in my name, which I had used as a workstation when I first began freelancing years ago. And the savings she thought she was taking were only a percentage of my total worth. The true money was hidden away in investments, accounts she had no idea existed. As the documents were signed and the process was over, Lily reclined back in her chair, content. "Well, I'm glad we could handle this like adults," she replied, patronizingly. I simply nodded, fighting back the impulse to chuckle. A week later, I packed my possessions and left the house she sorely desired. I gave her everything she asked for: furniture, decor, even pricey kitchen appliances she'd never used. It was not worth the effort to take any of it. Let her have her goodies. Ethan, of course, wasted no time settling in. A neighbor texted me a photo of him unloading boxes into the house, and Lily was standing on the porch with the same smug expression on her face. They probably thought they were creating the ideal little life together, fully unconscious of the storm looming just outside their view. What Lily didn't realize was that I had already been gathering evidence of her affair with Ethan months before the divorce. Photos, text messages, and even a GPS history reveal their frequent lunches at a neighboring hotel. And, while I could have used it to disrupt the divorce process, I chose against it. Why? Because dragging this out in court would simply prolong the drama, and I desired something far more rewarding. I expected karma to take its course, and I wanted front row seats when it did. In the weeks that followed, I adjusted to my new life. My profession continued to prosper, and my salary increased even more as new chances arose. Meanwhile, Lily and Ethan were showing off their love around town, sure they were the picture of happiness. I did not react. I did not call. I did not text. My quiet was deafening, and I knew it was going to wear them down soon. One day I got a message from a mutual buddy. "Derek, did you know Lily is throwing a housewarming party? She and Ethan are really leaning into this whole thing." I was just having a laugh. Of course they were. Lily was the type that sought validation from others and thrived on the appearance of accomplishment. She had no idea that her shining new life was constructed on a foundation of falsehoods, and that foundation was already beginning to crack. As I sat in my new apartment that evening, looking out at the city skyline, I couldn't help but feel peaceful. Lily believed she had won, but she had no idea what she had actually lost. And while Ethan was about to realize that taking something that wasn't his comes with a cost, I wasn't in a rush. Revenge, after all, is best served cold, and I was only getting started. I am not sure what Lily expected when she and Ethan agreed to make their relationship official. Perhaps she imagined a picture-perfect life filled with weekend brunches, romantic getaways, and the excitement of a new romance. If so, she was in for a harsh revelation. It did not take long for cracks to appear. Naturally, I maintained silence. There was no reason to intervene. They were excavating their own graves perfectly fine without my assistance. The first indication of problems came from whispers among mutual acquaintances. A friend told me that Lily and Ethan were already straining to sustain their new fantasy life. She's throwing all these dinner parties just to show off, my pal added. But I hear Ethan's been overspending, and they're behind on the bills. I was not surprised. Ethan has always been the type of person who preferred the lifestyle over the work. He enjoyed costly clothing, showy automobiles, and excellent meals, but he lacked the discipline and revenue to support it. Lily clearly didn't realize she had swapped financial stability for a showman with little substance. Then there was the talk about their disagreements. They were not the pair everyone assumed they were. People discussed the shouting battles that could be heard through the walls of their rental home. Yes, rented. Lily's house, which she had been so proud of accepting after the divorce, was no longer there. She'd been forced to sell it since she couldn't afford the upkeep. One day, I received a call from an old neighbor. "Derek, you won't believe this," she exclaimed, barely containing her laughter. "Lily and Ethan had the landlord banging on their door this morning. They're behind on rent." I leaned back in my chair, a smile growing across my face. "Oh, how far behind?" "3 months," she answered. "They're trying to act like it's no big deal, but you can tell they're struggling." It was rather poetic actually. The life they had so proudly built on betrayal was collapsing under the weight of their own conceit. Meanwhile, I concentrated on my personal life. My income had increased dramatically after the divorce, and I was busier than ever with new initiatives and opportunities. I put myself into my work, creating something genuine and long-lasting, while Lily and Ethan struggled with their hollow love. Then, unexpectedly, Lily reached out. She texted me one evening, pretending to be pleasant. "Hello Derek. I hope you are doing well. I just wanted to check in and see how things were going for you." I glanced at the message for a time, unsure whether to answer. I could sense the underlying desperation in her remarks. She was not checking in. She was fishing. Nonetheless, I chose to play along. "Things are going well, Lily," I said. "Business is growing. How about you?" Her reaction arrived shortly. "Oh, you know, Ethan and I are doing fine. We're making do with a limited budget." I nearly laughed. Managing. That was being generous. The real kicker arrived a week later. I was leaving a client meeting when I noticed Lily waiting outside the building. She looked different, tired, worried, and nowhere near as put together as she once was. "Derek," she said, her voice filled with something I hadn't heard from her in years: uncertainty. I approached her, adopting a neutral attitude. "Lily, what brings you here?" She hesitated and fiddled with the strap of her purse. I wanted to talk. Things have been tough lately, and I thought maybe we could catch up." Catch up? I knew precisely what she wanted, but I wasn't going to make things easy for her. "I'm a little busy," I said. "But I hope things improve for you." She tried a grin, but I could see the fissures underneath. As I went away, I couldn't help but feel satisfied. This was karma at its best. Lily and Ethan thought they were trading up, but they didn't comprehend the cost of their decisions. Now they were trapped in a life they couldn't afford, fighting to maintain appearances as the walls closed in around them. What is the best part? I didn't need to lift a finger. They had done this to themselves, and I was pleased to see from afar while they harvest what they had sowed. Their pristine little world was collapsing, and I hadn't even begun my payback yet. The thing about retribution is that it does not always have to be loud. Sometimes the sweetest successes are those that require no words. Simply tell the truth, and the outcomes will speak for themselves. This is exactly what I did. I was prospering as I watched Lily and Ethan's carefully created fantasy existence dissolve while they were preoccupied with maintaining their beauty. My work had taken off in ways I had not anticipated. Deals were closing left and right, and my annual revenue had risen to more than $533,000. I was not only doing well, I was blossoming. But I kept it secret. There was no need to boast about my success. Lily had already discarded me as the unproductive man, and I was content to let her believe that. Why correct her when her ignorance worked so well in my favor? Instead of focusing on them, I directed all of my attention inward. I updated my flat to a sleek, modern space in the middle of the city, reflecting my new existence. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sophisticated technology, and a stunning perspective of the skyline. It was a home made by my own efforts, free of the anger and treachery that had soiled the previous one. My days were packed with meetings, initiatives, and opportunities that kept me focused and involved. My nights were for me. I started going out more, reconnecting with old acquaintances and meeting new ones. Life felt lighter, more open, and full of possibilities. Of course, Lily was not entirely absent. Every now and then, I'd get a text or hear from common acquaintances about her and Ethan's latest problems: unpaid bills, disputes, and rising debt. Apparently, They attempted to throw a dinner party at the rental, only to have the electricity turned off in the middle of the evening because they had not paid the energy bill. "Derek," a friend said as they talked, "you should have seen it." Lily was mortified. Ethan tried to play it off like it was a mistake, but everyone knew what was really going on. I did not laugh, however. I simply nodded, letting the satisfaction flood over me. This wasn't about schadenfreude or pointing out their failures. It was all about balance. They had tilted the scales with their betrayal, and now life was balancing them out. One day, I ran into Ethan in a coffee shop. He appeared tired, his previously polished appearance replaced by something more unkempt. He didn't notice me at first, so I had a time to observe. He crouched over his laptop, his brow strained, scrolling through what appeared to be job postings. When he finally looked up to see me, his countenance changed. There was no smugness or bravado, only a glimmer of embarrassment. "Derek," he replied, standing awkwardly. "Ethan," I said calmly. "How's it going?" He hesitated, his gaze darting around as if looking for an exit. "Good, just busy with work and all that." "Work, huh?" I asked, lifting an eyebrow. "That's good to hear." He chuckled uneasily, but not with his eyes. "Yeah. Keeping busy. You know how it is." I simply nodded, allowing the silence to stretch between us. He shuffled uneasily before muttered something about needing to return to his chores and quickly excused himself. That interaction revealed everything I needed to know. Ethan was struggling, and Lily's lovely new life was not as idyllic as she had thought. Lily's texts increased in frequency over the course of several weeks. They were vague at first, simply checking in or wishing you well. But I understood what they actually meant. She was testing the waters to see whether I would be willing to help her out. I ignored most of them. The handful I did react to were brief and courteous, leaving her with little to work with. Her texts quickly grew more blunt. "Derek, I understand we've had our disagreements, but I could really use a friend right now." "A friend?" The irony was not lost on me. She had dumped me like yesterday's news, but now that her glossy new life was collapsing, she needed a lifeline. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I owed her nothing. Lily had made her decisions, and she now lived with them. My silence spoke volumes. While she and Ethan struggled to keep their heads above water, I soared. Opportunities kept coming. My investments were thriving. My life was full with tranquility and purpose. I did not need to confront Lily or Ethan. I didn't have to rant, accuse, or demand apologies. My achievement, my happiness, was my revenge. And the best part? They were fully aware of this. They saw it in every ignored message, every rumor about my success, and every interaction in which I left with my head held high as they hurried to pick up the pieces. It wasn't simply about getting even. It was about showing to myself that I could rise above everything. And I had, quietly, boldly, and totally. Lily and Ethan's downfall did not involve an explosion. It was a slow, crumbling disaster of their own making. I watched it unfold from afar, hearing bits and pieces from common connections and seeing the occasional social media post. Each fresh update provided a clearer picture. They were drowning in their own arrogance, and the water was rising rapidly. At first, Lily attempted to maintain appearances. She continued to share photos of herself and Ethan at fine restaurants, trips that appeared far more luxurious than they were, and snippets of their idyllic life. But the cracks were beginning to appear. Dinners grew less regular, vacations were non-existent, and the grins in their images appeared forced. Then came the murmurs. People began to notice that Lily was no longer as put together as she once was. Her once perfect hair and fancy clothes were being replaced by more affordable alternatives. Ethan, the ever-flashy showman, was now reusing clothing he'd barely worn once. It wasn't long before the rumors evolved into direct updates. One day, a mutual friend called and told me the news. "Derek, you'll love this," she remarked, hardly holding back her laughter. "Lily and Ethan are in some deep trouble. Apparently they're months behind on their rent." I lifted an eyebrow in surprise, but not shock. "Rent? I thought they owned that house." "Not even close," she replied. "They've been renting it this whole time. Word is they're on the verge of being evicted." I gave a tiny chuckle. It was poetic justice, really. Lily had battled so hard to get that house in the divorce, only to discover she couldn't afford to retain it. The financial woes did not end there. Another buddy reported that Ethan was laid off from his work. He was still appearing to have everything under control, but it was evident that he was struggling. Lily, for all of her concerns about me not working, had never worked a real job. Their idyllic life was crumbling under the weight of rising debt and a lack of income. One evening, when I was sipping coffee and scrolling through emails, Lily texted me. "Derek, I really want to talk to you. It's important." I glanced at the message for a long time before typing my response. "Is everything okay?" Her reply came almost immediately. "Not really. Ethan and I are going through a hard stretch, and I was hoping you might help. Just a small loan to see us through." A loan from me? I couldn't stop laughing at the irony. She'd abandoned me, mocked me, and flaunted her new relationship with Ethan, and now she wanted my aid. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, "but I'm afraid I can't help. I'm confident you will figure it out." Her response was delayed this time, and I could almost feel her frustration through the screen. "Derek, please, just once. You don't need to make it a huge issue." I did not bother answering, there was nothing left to say. Lily and Ethan had made their bed and were now lying on it. The next piece of news arrived a week later. Lily and Ethan had been officially evicted. The landlord, evidently tired of their excuses, had given them a strict deadline, which they had failed to meet. They were compelled to move into a small, dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of town. "Derek, I wish you could see it," the same mutual acquaintance said on the phone. "It's such a far cry from the life they were pretending to have. Lily's barely holding it together, and Ethan looks like he's aged 10 years. I did not gloat. I did not need to. Their failure was not because of me. It was about the implications of their own decisions. Lily had given up a life of security and support for a fantasy that couldn't endure reality. And Ethan, well, he was getting exactly what he sowed. However, the most telling indicator occurred during another unexpected encounter. I ran into Lily at a grocery shop, with her basket full of store-brand necessities. She looked up, noticed me, and froze. "Derek," she murmured with a trembling voice. "Lily," I responded, keeping my tone calm. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. She appeared defeated. The confident, cocky lady who had requested a divorce and boasted about her affair was nowhere to be found. "I hope you're doing well," I murmured, breaking the stillness. She nodded hurriedly, her gaze slipping away. "You too," she said, wheeling her cart down the aisle. As I watched her walk away, I couldn't help but experience a peculiar spectrum of feelings. Satisfaction, definitely, but also sorrow. Lily made her decisions, and they led her here. This was the life she had battled so hard to build, and now she was locked inside. I did not need to say or do anything to make her regret her actions. Life has already taken care of it for me. And as I walked out of the store that day, I realized that karma doesn't always require a push. It simply takes time. Everything quickly came to a head. I knew what was coming. It was inevitable. People like Lily and Ethan do not handle repercussions well. When their carefully crafted facade of prosperity begins to disintegrate, they lash out, looking for someone to blame, or someone to save them. One morning, while I was wrapping up a client conversation, my phone lit up with a number that I hadn't stored. But I knew it. Lily. For a moment, I pondered letting it ring out, but curiosity got the best of me. I picked up, keeping my voice quiet. "Derek speaking?" Her voice was tight, about to snap. "Derek, we need to talk." I sighed and leaned back in my chair. "About what, Lily?" There was a pause, as if she was searching for the appropriate words. "About everything. About Ethan. About us." I raised an eyebrow, but she couldn't see it. "Us. The nerve of this woman. Lily, there is no us. That ended the day you handed me divorce papers. What's this really about?" She paused again, her voice lowered. "We're struggling, Derek. Things haven't been easy since everything happened. I just thought maybe we could talk. Maybe you could help." Help. There it was. The true reason she called. "Help with what?" I inquired, pretending ignorance. "Financially," she conceded, her tone tinged with forced humility. "Just a loan to get us back on our feet." I couldn't help but laugh. "Lily, you left me because you thought I wasn't good enough, that I didn't work hard enough or make enough money for you. And now you want me to fix the mess you made?" Her voice tightened, and defensiveness crept in. "You don't understand. Ethan and I just hit a rough patch." "A rough patch," I interrupted her. "Lily, you made your choice. You left me for Ethan, thinking he was the better option, and now you want me to clean up after you? Not a chance." She began to complain, but I stopped her. "You wanted to be free, Lily, free of me, free of my lack of ambition, so enjoy that freedom. I have no interest in being your safety net." I hung up before she could reply. The following interaction was not over the phone. It was in person. A week later, Lily arrived at my office unexpectedly. She appeared stressed, her previously polished looks transformed by something far more desperate. "Derek," she exclaimed, walking into my office despite my assistant's attempts to stop her. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms. "You've got 2 minutes. Make it count." She launched into a tirade about how horrible things had been for her and Ethan, how the world had treated them unfairly, and how she was only asking for a simple favor. "Lily," I quipped, "you made your decisions. You left me for Ethan, thinking you were upgrading your life. How's that working out for you?" Her face reddened with rage and shame. "Derek, I know I hurt you, but you don't have to be so cruel. I thought you were better than this." "Better than this?" I asked, laughing. "You thought I was a failure, Lily. You thought I wasn't good enough. Now you're here begging me for help because your perfect life isn't so perfect after all. I owe you nothing." Just then, as if the world wanted to emphasize the point, Ethan came in. He must have followed her since his timing was too good to be coincidental. He appeared even worse than Lily, unkempt, agitated, and plainly out of his element. "Derek," he said, attempting to be nonchalant, but his voice was unsteady. "Can we talk man to man?" I rose up and walked around my desk to meet him. "Man to man," I repeated. "You mean the same way you talked to me while sleeping with my wife behind my back? Save it, Ethan." He winced, but pressed on. "Look, we made mistakes, but Lily and I are in a tough spot, and we thought maybe you'd be willing to help us out. Just a loan, something small." I shook my head and laughed again. "Unbelievable. You betrayed me, lied to me, and now you want me to bail you out? The audacity is impressive, I'll give you that." Ethan's cheeks flushed hot, and his hands balled into fists at his sides. "You don't have to be a jerk about it, Derek." I moved closer, my voice low but forceful. "I don't owe you anything, Ethan. You made your bed, now lie in it." Lily reached out and pleaded. "Please, Derek, we're desperate." I turned to her and spoke calmly but coldly. "Desperation doesn't erase betrayal. Lily, you both made your choices, and now you're living with them. This conversation is over." Without saying anything, I moved to the door and opened it, beckoning for them to leave. They stayed there for a moment, shocked, before moving out, their heads lowered. As the door shut behind them, I felt a sense of completion. They felt they could influence or shame me into assisting them, but I was no longer the man they thought they knew. This was not simply about vengeance. This was about standing strong, recognizing my worth, and refusing to let those who had failed me bring me down. And as I sat back at my desk, I couldn't stop smiling. They thought they had broken me. Instead, they'd freed me. The beauty of treachery is that it has the ability to turn on itself. Ethan and Lily felt they could escape the mess they had made by banding together. However, the gaps in their relationship began to widen into full-blown fractures. It was almost lyrical to see them crumble beneath the weight of their own choices. The first indication came from a mutual acquaintance, Naomi, who always seemed to have her ear to the ground. She called me one afternoon, her voice full of gossip. "Derek, you're not going to believe this," she told him. "What now, Naomi?" I responded, amused by her dramatic tone. "It seems Ethan has been, how should I put this, seeing someone else." I laughed, a genuine belly laugh that I hadn't had in a while. "Seeing someone else? Are you serious?" "Dead serious," she remarked. "Apparently Lily caught him texting another woman, some young thing from his new job, if you can believe it." I shake my head. The irony was so thick, I could taste it. Ethan, the man who had betrayed me and Lily, was now betraying her in the same way. Karma did not simply catch up with them, it ran them over. The fallout was fast. Lily, who had always been cocky and confident, was now caught off guard. According to what I heard, she confronted Ethan in a very public setting, screaming at him in the middle of a cafe. He tried to brush it off, Naomi explained, loving every detail. Said it wasn't a big deal, and Lily completely lost it. She threw her coffee at him. I could almost see it. Lily, the same lady who once boasted about leaving me for a better man, is now down to tossing lattes in public. It seemed almost too good to be true. But it did not end there. The woman Ethan had been texting was not a casual affair. He'd met her at his new work, and she was everything Lily wasn't: young, reckless, and uninterested in settling down. Ethan, being the impetuous moron he was, convinced himself that she was worth sacrificing everything for. Lily, of course, did not take the treachery calmly. She sought explanations. I demanded that Ethan clean up the mess he'd created. But Ethan was Ethan, and repairing things was never his strong tea. Instead, he doubled back, blaming Lily for their financial problems and accusing her of being overly demanding. Their disputes were the buzz of the town. Neighbors reported hearing yelling battles late at night. More than one friend described unpleasant occasions in which Lily burst into tears in the middle of a conversation. Ethan eventually moved away, leaving Lily in their filthy flat with no method of paying the rent. She contacted me again during this period, her voice quivering with rage and desperation. "Derek," she began, without bothering with pleasantries. "You were right about Ethan. He's a liar and a cheat, and I can't believe I trusted him." I leaned back in my chair and let her rant. I could have given her sympathy or said something conciliatory, but where was the fun in that? "Lily," I replied after she paused for breath. "You made your choice. You chose Ethan over me, thinking he was the better man. How's that working out for you?" She remained silent for a moment. On the other end of the line, I could hear her breathing heavily. Finally, she murmured, "I don't need your lectures, Derek. I need your help." "No," I responded firmly. "What you need is to learn to live with the consequences of your decisions." She hung up with me after that. According to what I learned later, Ethan did not return. He moved in with his new girlfriend, who soon found he was just as unstable as Lily. Last I heard, he was couch surfing, unable to maintain a job or a relationship. Lily, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces of her broken existence. She had no work, no funds, and no one else to turn to. Her family had grown bored of her incessant drama, and even her friends had begun to drift apart. The life she had fought so hard to create with Ethan had crumbled to ash. And I didn't have to move a finger. Karma had completed all of the work for me. There's a certain thrill in knowing that people like Lily and Ethan will eventually destroy themselves. They believe they are cunning, that they can deceive and betray their way to happiness. However, life has a way of humbling them. And while they were fighting, I was thriving. My work was booming, my life was tranquil, and my future seemed brighter than ever. They say that living well is the best form of payback, and by that standard, I had won. The odd thing about hitting rock bottom, when you're the one betrayed, humiliated, and rejected, is that you realize how resilient you truly are. For me, divorce was not the end. This was the beginning. A new start camouflaged as catastrophe. Lily and Ethan had destroyed the bridge behind them, but I was already constructing a better one ahead. Following the divorce, I made a pledge to myself that I would not let their betrayal define me. I'd soar beyond it. Not for retribution, but for my own peace. And this is exactly what I did. The first stage involved investing in myself. I updated my apartment to a beautiful penthouse in the city center. Floor-to-ceiling windows, simple furniture, and a vista that reminded me every day of how far I had come. It wasn't simply a place to live. It was a statement, a representation of my new existence. My formerly solid career began to flourish in unexpected ways. Freed from the stress of Lily's incessant criticisms and Ethan's backstabbing, I refocused on my work. Clients noticed. New contracts flowed in. My annual income has surged, reaching $513,000 and growing. Then there were unexpected chances. My skill and reputation in my profession resulted in lecture engagements, collaborations, and investment opportunities. Every accomplishment seemed like a tiny win, a reminder that I was more than the man Lily had dismissed. Socially, I started rebuilding as well. Old acquaintances who had drifted apart over the years reconnected. New friends entered my life. People who valued me for who I was, rather than what they could get from me. I began attending events, networking with like-minded people, and even taking the odd weekend trip for fun. However, the most major alteration was internal. I learned to value myself in ways I hadn't previously. For years, I had devoted so much work to keeping Lily happy, attempting to match her unreasonable expectations, that I had lost sight of my own worth. Now I was reclaiming it. Therapy was also helpful. I won't pretend I did anything on my own. Talking to someone objective, someone who could help me comprehend the betrayal and ongoing anger, was priceless. My therapist once told me, "Derek, you're not responsible for other people's decisions, you're only responsible for how you react to them." Those words became my motto. Then there was my creative side. I had always dabbled in writing and photography, but now I had the time and energy to pursue both properly. I established a blog, which is half personal journal, part professional thoughts, and it soon gathered traction. People connected with my tale of rebuilding, of turning suffering into progress. Every now and then, I heard rumors about Lily and Ethan. Their downhill fall had become something of a cautionary tale in our former circle of acquaintances. The latest reports were always the same: more debt, drama, and remorse. Derek, a mutual acquaintance, once commented over coffee, "I don't know how you're so calm about all this. If I were in your shoes, I'd be furious." I shrugged. What's the point? They're living their karma. I don't need to add to it. And it was true. Watching them struggle while I succeeded was not only pleasant, but also liberating. I didn't need to seek vengeance or harbor anger. I was too busy living happily. However, there were times of introspection. Late at night, peering out at the city lights from my penthouse, I'd reflect on everything I'd gone through: betrayal, heartache, and wrath. It had not been simple to move on, but I had done so. In the process, I discovered a side of myself I didn't know existed. Stronger, wiser, more confident. Life continued to throw problems at me, as it always does. But I approached each one with clarity and resilience that I had never experienced before. Losing Lily and Ethan was awful, but in retrospect, it was the best thing that had happened to me. They didn't just leave, they had released me. Every day seemed like progress. I was not simply surviving, I was thriving. And the best part, I did not need anyone's approval to prove it. I had created a life I was proud of, surrounded by people who appreciated me and full of exciting chances. My universe was brighter, larger, and better than anything Lily or Ethan could have dreamed. And as far as I was concerned, the chapter with them had over. This was my story now, and I was writing it just the way I wanted. My parents say I'm a bad daughter because I won't force my husband to rehire my brother, who was fired for theft after I helped him get the job. I, a 34-year-old female, grew up in a family-oriented household where everyone is expected to go above and beyond for one another. My parents have always regarded my younger brother, Liam, 29, as the golden kid. Growing up, if Liam got into trouble, I was the one who had to repair it. He crashed my bike when I was a youngster. I was chastised for allowing him to ride it and then given my stipend to help pay for repairs. He failed a class at school. I was urged to tutor him every day, even if it meant canceling my own plans. You get the picture. I became the unofficial cleanup crew for Liam's mess. I adore my brother, but he is reckless, charming when he wants something, and never willing to face repercussions. Meanwhile, I worked hard to establish a steady lifestyle. I went to college, obtained a decent job, and eventually married my spouse, Dan, 36, a male. Dan is amazing, patient, honest, and really hardworking. He began working for his company more than a decade ago and has worked his way up to management. It's not a large organization, but it is a renowned mid-size company in the technology hardware market. Dan leads a team that handles inventory and logistics for high-end electronic equipment. He takes his profession and the recommendations he makes very seriously. Over the years, my parents have had no qualms about asking me for various favors for Liam, such as money for his car repairs or a place for him to crash. We let him stay in our guest room for a short time last year after he ended his relationship with a woman. You name it. They always phrase it as, family helps family. For the most part, I attempted to help when I could, but as I grew older, I also began to place some soft boundaries. I quit lending money after one too many loans that never came back. For example, my folks didn't take it well. Cue the guilt trips about how wealthy I am while Liam struggles, and how I owe it to my family to share the good fortune. It is exhausting, to say the least. Latest request. Liam lost his job again a few months earlier. He has a poor employment history, with brief stints in retail and warehouses. My parents called, not so quietly implying that Dan could get a job for Liam at his company. They discussed how Liam simply needed someone to give him a chance, and how I could stand up for family by asking my husband to do so. I was quite hesitant. As you may already be aware, combining family and business may go tragically wrong. But Liam begged me as well, saying he'd truly straighten up if he had a decent employment opportunity. He promised he'd be responsible and make me proud. I'll admit that I felt for him. He seems earnest and desperate. After weeks of persuasion and seeing my brother almost on his knees, I surrendered. I spoke to Dan. Dan was skeptical, but he agreed to help. He was able to obtain Liam an entry-level position on his team, primarily processing inventory records and assisting in the warehouse. It was not flashy, but it paid well and offered benefits, and that was the foot-in-the-door opportunity Liam had been longing for. Dan made it plain to both me and Liam that suggesting him meant he was taking a risk. If Liam made a mistake, Dan's reputation would suffer. I assured my husband that I understood, and I genuinely believed that my brother would step up, at least this time. For the first month or so, everything seemed fine. According to what I've heard, Liam arrived on schedule and was still learning the ropes. My husband would give me courteous short updates, such as, "Your brother is doing fine." I breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that this time the risk would pay off. Okay, so much for that. Not long after Liam completed his 3-month probation, all hell broke loose. The night Dan returned home was unusually silent. He sat me down and explained that there had been an incident at work with Liam. My stomach sank. Dan then revealed that a couple of high-end graphics cards, each worth a small sum, had gone missing from the inventory cage. These are high-tech components that their company supplies. It's a significant loss. They reviewed the security footage and discovered my brother attempting to sneak the goods out of his backpack. Liam attempted to steal expensive equipment from the warehouse and was caught red-handed on camera. I felt humiliated. According to Dan, when confronted by management, Liam initially tried to pretend that he believed them were trash, which was plainly a phony argument. Who would put brand new, unopened electronics in their own bag if they thought they were trash? Then he started begging, saying he needed money and planned to sell them. It was just a disaster. The corporation, like every reasonable organization, has a zero-tolerance policy against theft. Dan stated that HR was involved, and Liam's employment was terminated on the spot. Dan informed me that Liam had been dismissed and escorted out earlier that day. Here's when things get even more difficult. That evening, once I received the news, my phone flooded with calls from my parents. I was hardly processing my own amazement and rage when I responded. A big mistake. My parents were furious at me. Liam apparently ran directly to them after being sacked, claiming that he was wrongly punished for certain lost items. They either believed him or pretended they did. The debate swiftly devolved into them demanding that I remedy this. I tried to explain to them that Liam was captured on camera, and that it was entirely his fault. They would not hear it. My father stated something along the lines of, "Your husband should have protected his own family. Who cares about a couple gadgets? Family comes first." I was stunned. I contended that Dan helped by giving him a chance, and it was Liam who squandered it. Mom began crying, telling me that I should persuade Dan to give Liam his job back since he will struggle again, and it will be partly my fault for not guiding him. She genuinely suggested I should have prevented this, as if I was my brother's keeper. I made it clear to them that I would not ask Dan to risk his reputation by rehiring someone who had essentially stolen from the organization. I stated that Liam is an adult and must face with the consequences of his actions. Well, that triggered an explosion. My mother sobbed even harder, saying I was harsh and merciless to my own brother. Dad practically hissed that I was betraying my family for my spouse, and that I needed to remember where my loyalty should be. It turned into a screaming match, with them accusing me of turning my back on my brother. I ended up yelling back that Liam had done this on himself, and I was not going to cover for him. Dad then issued me an ultimatum. Either I convince Dan to rectify this, reinstate my brother, or find him another job in the company, or I shouldn't bother phoning or coming home. He said, "If I don't help my brother in his time of need, I'm not a good daughter or sister." I was flabbergasted. In the heat of the moment, I shouted something along the lines of, "If that's how they feel, then so be it," and hung up. That was a few days ago. I haven't communicated with my parents or Liam since. After I calmed down, I texted my brother, basically telling him I couldn't help him and wondering what he was thinking. He hasn't answered, but he did post a vaguely theatrical message on social media about backstabbers and family that doesn't support you, which I believe is meant at me. Now I am torn. My upbringing instilled in me that family is everything. I'm sorry things have gotten to this point. A part of me wonders if I should have tried harder to reason with Dan or his company, even though there's little possibility they'd rehire a convicted crook. Another part of me is mad with my brother for being so stupid, and at my parents for expecting me to miraculously fix it. My hubby is totally on my side. He claims that Liam will never be able to or should be able to reclaim his work, and that my parents are wrong to place this burden on me. I know he's correct logically, but the guilt and second-guessing are eating at me because I essentially aided the entire situation by getting him the position in the first place. Did I set him up for failure? So, Reddit, am I the one who refused to urge my spouse to rehire or ignore my brother's theft? Edit. For clarity, many people are wondering why the company did not file charges. Trust me, I was also bracing for that. Dan advocated for my brother, which is the only reason he is not facing criminal charges. Dan was outraged with Liam, but he persuaded his superiors to simply terminate Liam and not notify the police. I believe it was partly out of loyalty to me, and because he didn't want me to cope with the consequences of a family arrest. It was a one-time kindness gesture. Despite knowing this, My parents continue to believe that Liam is the victim in this situation. That's strange. Update 1. Thank you Reddit for all of the responses to my initial article. I'm honestly astounded by how much attention it received and how kind and frankly honest everyone was. It's been a few days since I posted, and I've had time to process things. Reading the comments was eye-opening. Many of you pointed out how absurd it is for my parents to expect me to cover up an actual theft, and that this enabling behavior has most certainly been ongoing for a long time. That truly struck me because it is true. This dynamic did not arise overnight. I was lying awake last night remembering another occurrence from years ago. When Liam was in his late teens, he was caught shoplifting in a mall. Instead of confronting him with the consequences, my parents mediated the situation through the store. They knew the owner, therefore no charges were brought. I begged them to let Liam face the consequences so he might learn. Of course they wouldn't. He received a token penalty at home, including a week of grounding, which was subsequently pushed under the rug. They even informed our families that it was a misunderstanding. Liam learned nothing from the experience except that mom and dad were always there to help him out. That was one of the first times I knew my parents would manipulate reality to protect him. Anyway, your remarks left me with a lot to think about. The verdict was overwhelmingly not what I expected, but I needed to hear from neutral people. You all also helped me see how much my family's toxic dynamic has pushed me into this fixer role. Many of you said, if you keep catching your brother when he falls, he'll never learn to pick himself up. I'm taking it to heart. To address some popular queries, how did this affect Dan's job? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. There was some blowback. I asked Dan if he had gotten in trouble for endorsing Liam. He admitted he had an extremely awkward conversation with his superiors. Essentially, he had to repent for vouching for someone who later stole and commit to be more cautious about referrals. It was embarrassing for him. I feel terrible. He put his neck out to help my brother at my request, and it burned him. Dan, being the sweetheart he is, does not blame me, but rather Liam. But I still feel bad since my family brought him into this situation. Does your sibling have a history of such behavior? Aside from the shoplifting case above, I believe so. He's been fired from at least one prior job before. At the time, my parents said that the manager was out to get him. But knowing what I know now, I wouldn't be shocked if Liam also played a role in the firing. My parents have a habit of minimizing or concealing his mistakes. It was as if they were training me to see him as blameless, so that I would continue to assist. Have your parents always been so biased, enabling? Oh sure. My parents have continuously enabled Liam, placing the onus on me to be the responsible one. If he messed up, I was supposed to correct it or cover for him. This trend dates back a long time and it appears to have not changed even now that we are grown-ups. So, here's what I've done since my first post, owing in large part to your recommendations. Many commenters asked me to be firm and establish clear boundaries. Some even suggested considering limited contact or no contact if my parents continue this behavior. That thought is difficult for me. As dysfunctional as things are, the prospect of losing my parents and brother completely is terrible. But I know I can't continue living under their thumb. I have not officially declared no contact or anything. I sent my folks a beautifully crafted email. I took a day to draft it because I wanted to be firm, yet calm. In the email, I emphasized my love for them and Liam, but what they're asking of me is incorrect. I emphasized that I cannot and will not ask Dan to compromise his career by rehiring Liam or finding him a new position. I emphasized that Liam's choices have repercussions, and that this is his responsibility, not mine or Dan's. I also emphasized that I will not participate if they only intend to throw insults or ultimatums. Basically, I informed them that I'm willing to discuss, but not if they continue to be abusive or expect me to perform miracles. I sent the email the day after my post went up. So far, no reaction. I know they witnessed it. I received a read receipt, which is one of the benefits of working in an extremely detailed workplace. Their silence is quite telling. It feels like they're using the silent treatment to punish me for not obeying. It sucks, but I'm bracing myself. I also tried to reach out to Liam. I texted him. I'm here if he wants to talk about what happened or needs advice, but I can't undo what he did. He did not respond. Instead, he shared another cryptic social media message about false individuals and those who prioritize others over themselves. He also uploaded a pathetic selfie with the comment, "Betrayed by those closest to you." It's so dramatic that I would chuckle if it didn't hurt. I see the silence as a sign. They're most likely waiting for me to break down and apologize. Old me definitely would have by now, but after hearing all of your points of view, I know that holding firm is the appropriate thing to do. I have not blocked anyone. I want to leave the door open for courteous communication, but I refuse to pursue them. One other thing, some of you strongly recommended treatment, both for myself to unlearn this guilt and conditioning, and for Liam, though he wouldn't go until pushed. I took the initial step and began searching for a therapist for myself. I haven't found the proper fit yet, but thanks for the push. That is where things stand. A tight impasse. I'm standing firm, taking care of my mental health as best I can, and hoping that time will bring my parents and brother around. I won't lie, a part of me still thinks they'll reach out willing to discuss rather than demand, but I'm not holding my breath. I'll keep you updated if anything changes. For the time being, I'm preparing myself for the long haul. Update 2. I wish I could say the impasse ended on a nice note, but alas. Silent treatment as a weapon is not new in my family. I remembered a time in high school when I defied my parents over something little. I refused to cancel our plans to tutor Liam. They retaliated by freezing me out for a week until I gave in. That was their strategy, remove affection and acceptance until I fell back into line. So, what about mom and dad's silence during the previous few days? Not surprising. I recognize the approach, and with my husband's and your support, I'm determined not to give in this time. However, it appears that my parents have far more ridiculous techniques than simply giving me the cold shoulder. Dan arrived home from work a few days ago, visibly agitated. He informed me that my father had phoned his company. Yes, my father emailed Dan's employer, essentially to protest about Liam's termination. In the email, Dad accused Dan of failing to defend his family and depicted Liam as a victim of an unfair company. He even claimed that the corporation overreacted and that Liam just took those products since he wasn't earning enough to survive. What? It was a flurry of guilt tripping. We're family, how could you do this? And minimizing. It was only a couple of gadgets, nothing major. I was absolutely ashamed. Fortunately, Dan's supervisor is smart. The employer called Dan only to say, "Please ask your father-in-law not to contact us again." He wasn't angry with Dan, but rather perplexed and little amused that my father thought a sob story would outweigh a theft. Dan apologized to his supervisor and told him that it would not happen again. I can't express how outraged I was. Who does this? Who tries to harass their son-in-law's workplace because they are upset that their other son faced consequences? This went too far. That night, I sent my parents another email, this one more shorter and angrier than the last. I told them not to interfere with Dan's job again. I told them that if they had any respect for me, they would stop immediately. I warned them that if they pulled another act like that, it would irreversibly ruin our relationship. Honestly, it could already be beyond repair. I sent it, then contacted my mother because I was too outraged to confront Dad directly. Mom responded. She sounded exhausted and sorrowful, as if I was pressuring them into these drastic measures. She added, "They only went behind my back because I refused to help your own brother." She then asked, "What were we supposed to do? Just let him suffer?" The conversation ran in circles. She insisted they had no choice because I refused to help. I continued telling her that what they did was utterly unacceptable. She reiterated Liam's precarious situation and how his parents are doing everything they can to help him. I pointed out that they always seem to expect sacrifices from me or Dan. It fell on deaf ears. I will admit that I lost my patience. I basically remarked that if they don't realize how messed up everything is, I'm not sure what else to say. So I hung up. We've gone back to silence since that call. No response to my irate email. No follow-ups. Just nothing. The next day, I received a snide text from my brother saying, "He yelled at Mom." Nice. I did not answer. It is irritating. He is letting our parents fight his battles and then seeming smug when I am furious. The lack of self-awareness is staggering. For the time being, my primary focus is on my own household. Dan has been nothing but helpful, and happily, his company considers the situation resolved after attributing it to a wayward family member. We spend our evenings quietly, and he constantly telling me I am doing the right thing. I must have asked him 20 times, "Am I really wrong?" And he would simply hug me and say, "No, you're right." I don't know what happens next. Maybe my parents will keep pretending I don't exist unless I bend. Perhaps another storm is brewing. Honestly, I'm prepared for anything. Update 3. I expected things to quiet down, but instead I got one last emotional roller coaster with my family. My mother has always had a softer touch than Dad. She dislikes open conflict and prefers to act as a mediator or guilt tripper. When I was younger, if I upset Dad, Mom would come to me later and say, You know your father loves you, he's just disappointed. She would then pressure me to apologize or obey for the sake of the family. She's a quiet enabler, the type who will say, "Please do this for us," making you feel much guiltier than yelling would. A few days after my last update, Mom contacted me directly for the first time since the whole debacle. She left a voicemail stating that she wanted to talk and would come over alone if I agreed. I had mixed sentiments. Mom came over the next evening. Dan stayed home to provide support, but he allowed us privacy by hanging out in the backyard within earshot. When I opened the door and saw my mother standing there, fatigued and teary-eyed, I almost broke down. I hugged her, and we sat in the living room. She began by stating she missed me and regretted that we weren't talking. I told her I missed her, but she quickly eased into the same plea, saying, "This situation with your brother has gotten out of hand," and my father was beside himself with grief. She implored me to rethink assisting Liam, not necessarily getting him his former work back, but perhaps I could ask Dan if he knows of any jobs for Liam, or utilize my contacts elsewhere. Essentially, if I don't bring him back into Dan's firm, can I find him something else? She described it as a compromise. I listened, trying to remain cool. Then I gently but firmly told her, "Mom, I've tried to help Liam so many times. I got him the job, and he lost it because of his own actions. He has to face the consequences and find his own way now." I also expressed how hurt I was that they turned on me and Dan, especially with the work email stunt. Mom was in tears the entire time. She kept adding, "You don't understand how difficult it is for us. He's our son, and we can't just let him fail." I responded that I understand they love him, but protecting him from consequences just hurts all of us. I even applied some of the advice I received from you people about how protecting someone from failure ensures they never learn. She did not raise her voice or yell at me, she just grieved silently and said, "I'm so sorry it's come to this. I wish you could find it in your heart to forgive him and help him." That completely crushed my heart. I also started crying. I responded, "I don't want our family torn apart either, but I can't be the one to fix this. Not this time." For a moment, we simply held hands and cried together. I hope she now understands. But then she whispered, just above a whisper, "Your father says he won't speak to you until you make this right." I have no idea what to do. Then she inquired, "Is Dan really not willing to give him another chance? Just one more. Maybe in a different department?" That's when I realized she still hadn't understood what I was saying. All she could think about was me finding a magical solution for Liam. I shook my head and said, "No, Mom. Dan can't and won't do that. It's not about willingness. It's just not possible or fair. Liam burned that bridge." I reminded her that Dan had already gone to bat to avoid legal ramifications. If things had gone differently, Liam might have a criminal record. She nodded, but I doubt it sank in. Mom finally stated softly, "If you won't help at all, I don't know how to convince your father. He feels like you've turned your back on us." I was exhausted and choked up at this point. I corrected myself. "I'm sorry he feels that way, but I have to look out for my own family and myself too. I can't do what he wants." She looked at me for a long time and said, "We love you. I hope you'll reconsider." I led her to the door. We hugged again, both still crying. I told her I adored them and that my door was always open if they wanted to talk, as long as it wasn't about me repairing Liam's life. She nodded, but made no promises, and then departed. That was the last time I saw my mother in person. There has been no further communication since that visit. It seems uncomfortably unsolved. There was no breakthrough. They're still locked in their perspective while I'm stuck in mine. Dad has not contacted me at all. He appears to be holding firm until I correct the situation. Mom is sad, but will not overtly oppose Dad or the mission to save Liam. My brother has not contacted out either. I suppose he's simply lurking behind them and waiting. Following that encounter, I was in a state of sadness for the next 3 days. Thank goodness for Dan, who was there to embrace me while I sobbed. It is one thing to stand your position in a heated situation. It's another to witness your mother cry and remain firm. Final update. It's been a while since I last updated. I wanted to give it some time to see how things would settle. It's been several months, and I wish I could give a more positive resolution, but reality isn't a sitcom. The short version is that we are still estranged. My parents have not contacted me, nor have I contacted them in any meaningful way. We didn't even communicate during the customary family gatherings or holidays that passed, which was a first in my life. It was unfortunate to miss out on those traditions. I will not lie. I spent one holiday evening ugly crying on the couch because I was waiting for my mother's call, which never arrived. Meanwhile, I've learned a few things about my family through word of mouth. According to a cousin, my parents eventually found another employment for Liam. Apparently, my father asked an old buddy for a favor to get Liam an entry-level position at another company. So my brother is currently employed. True to tradition, it appears that even when I'm not around, my parents continue to bail him out through connections. I hope he doesn't waste this opportunity. However, given history, I have some worries. Regardless, it alleviated one of my concerns: my brother's long-term financial struggles. He has a job. Whatever he does with it is entirely up to him. I've been focused on my personal well-being. I did eventually find a therapist and have been seeing him on a regular basis. It's been quite beneficial to talk about everything: the guilt, the rage, and the loss of practically losing my family, at least for now. My marriage, thankfully, is stable. If anything, this event drew myself and Dan even closer. We've had a lot of conversations about boundaries and the type of family environment we want if we ever have children. Dan has been my rock throughout all, reminding me that I am not cruel or heartless, that I have the right to set limits, and that I am not defined by my parents' approval. I honestly don't know how I would have made it through these months without his constant support and the validation from so many of you on Reddit. Do I still have hope for reconciliation? In a way, yeah. They're my parents and brother. I'll probably never give up hope that we'll be able to make things right. I'd love to have a relationship with them that isn't based on guilt and enabling, but I've realized that I can't change it. They would have to meet me halfway, and they have not demonstrated any willingness to do so thus far. Accepting this has been difficult, but it has brought me some peace. If they never return, I will be sad, but I will live. My door is still open if they ever chose to speak to me as a daughter rather than a resource to be exploited. Meanwhile, I'm doing the best I can with my life. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to comment and provide me advice and moral support. I truly feel that without the perspective and encouragement I received here, I would have crumbled and caved in to my family's demands, as I always did. My twin arrived at my wedding in a white dress, claimed to be me, and tried to interrupt. When I confronted her, she cried, "I'm saving you." I, a 24-year-old female, seek advice on my twin sister Avery, a 24-year-old female, and whether I made the right decision in entirely cutting her off. My family thinks I was overreacting, but I can't get over what she did. Avery and I are identical twins. Growing up, everyone constantly commented on how different we were, even though we looked identical. I was the quiet one who enjoyed literature and painting, whereas she was boisterous and popular. Our parents always made sure we had different identities, but Avery never seemed to be content with that. Throughout high school, Avery copied whatever I did. If I joined the drama club, she would also join. If I started dating someone, she would suddenly find them interesting. When I was accepted to art school with a scholarship, she enrolled to the same program, despite having no prior interest in painting. She was also admitted based on her grades rather than her talent. At art school, I met Ryan, a 26-year-old male. He was in my sculpture class, and we connected over our mutual passion of making things with our hands. Ryan was unlike anyone I'd dated before. He remained calm, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in my job and ambitions. We started dating during our second year. Avery disliked Ryan right away. She would comment on how uninteresting he was and how I should do better. She would interrupt our chats whenever he came over to our shared apartment. She even began flirting with him in front of me, making both Ryan and I uncomfortable. After graduation, Ryan and I relocated to Portland together. Avery remained in our hometown and secured a position at a marketing agency. I could finally breathe after years. I recognized how much Avery's continual presence had changed me. I began creating art that was completely mine, without fear of her copying or condemning it. Ryan proposed to me 6 months ago on a weekend vacation to the coast. It was perfect and private. Just the two of us watching the sunset. When I contacted Avery to deliver her the news, she remained silent for a long time. Then she asked if I was sure I wanted to marry someone this young. She claimed I was rushing into things, and Ryan most likely wanted to lock me up before I discovered I could do better. I dismissed her comments and asked her to be my maid of honor regardless. She agreed, but I could tell she was unhappy about it. The trouble began immediately. Avery preferred to plan everything her way. She chose a dress type she knew I disliked and claimed it would look better on both of us because we were twins. When I tried on several outfits, she threw a fuss and thought I was being difficult. She also suggested alterations to the guest list, venue, and menu. Every idea was the reverse of what Ryan and I want. When I urged her to stop, she explained that she was only trying to help make my wedding better. 3 months ago, Avery paid us a weekend visit to discuss wedding plans. Ryan was out of town for work, leaving just the two of us. I felt it would be good to spend time with my sister like we did as children. On Saturday night, we were discussing centerpiece alternatives when Avery abruptly stopped talking. She looked at me strangely and said she had something important to tell me. She explained that she had been thinking a lot about my engagement and decided she couldn't watch me make such a terrible mistake. She told me Ryan was not the appropriate person for me and that I was settling out of fear of being alone. I inquired what she meant, and she replied Ryan was uninteresting and lacked ambition. She pointed out that he was still working at the same woodworking shop he started directly after graduation, but others his age were climbing corporate ladders. She thought I was too talented and intelligent to be tied down to someone who would limit me. I told her Ryan enjoyed his work and was going to start his own furniture business soon. She laughed and claimed it confirmed her point about him lacking genuine ambition. Then she uttered something that made my blood turn cold. She informed me she had been studying Ryan online and discovered certain issues that troubled her. When I questioned what she meant, she explained that she had seen him eating lunch with a woman from his workplace several times. I immediately recognized who she was talking about. Julia was Ryan's co-worker and friend. She was married with 2 children, and Ryan had mentioned having lunch with her and other co-workers several times. I told Avery about it, but she shook her head and said it seemed like more than friendship to her. Avery took out her phone and showed me images she had shot of Ryan and Julia in a restaurant. They were plainly enjoying a typical lunch chat, but Avery zoomed in and cropped the images to make it appear more intimate than it actually was. I looked at the images and understood that Avery had driven 3 hours to Portland to spy on my fiancé. She had followed him around and took photographs without his knowledge. The level of forethought and duplicity was staggering. When I asked her why she would do this, she broke down in tears. She claimed she loved me too much to let me wreck my life. She persuaded me to call off the engagement, saying we could return home together and start over. That was then I realized what this was all about. Avery was unconcerned about my pleasure. She was angry that I had a life without her. She couldn't bear the fact that Ryan and I were creating something together that didn't include her. I told her she had to leave immediately. She began crying louder and stated I had chosen a man over my own sister. She said that we were intended to stay together forever and that I was breaking up our family. I packed her suitcases as she sobbed on my couch. When I handed them to her, she grabbed my arm and declared she would not be my maid of honor if I continued to behave like this. I assured her that was all right because she was no longer invited to the wedding at all. She left that night, and I haven't spoken with her since. I blocked her phone number and social media profiles. The next day I received calls from my parents, aunts, and several relatives. Avery had contacted everyone and informed them that I had kicked her out for attempting to help me. She claimed I accused her of lying and chose Ryan over family. My mother contacted me crying, saying she couldn't believe I'd treat Avery like this. She claimed Avery was simply looking out for me and that cutting her off was excessive. My father was quieter, but agreed that I should try to resolve matters with Avery. My extended family has taken sides. Some say I overreacted, while others understand why I was furious. But the majority believe I should forgive Avery because she is my twin, and we have always been close. Ryan has been sympathetic, but I can sense he is stressed about the issue. He offered to speak with Avery directly, but I declined. I don't want her anywhere near him or our relationship. The wedding is in 2 months and I keep receiving texts from family members asking if Avery will go. When I answer no, they look at me as if I'm the villain in the story. I've started questioning myself. Maybe Avery was genuinely trying to help in her own misguided way. Perhaps I was too harsh by cutting her off entirely. But every time I think about those images and the preparation that went into taking them, I become irritated all over again. Am I wrong to terminate my friendship with my twin sister over this? Should I try to reconcile before to the wedding? Update 1. I had not expected my post to receive so much attention, so thank you to everyone who commented. The majority of you reinforced what I already knew deep inside, which helped me remain strong when things grew worse. Much has happened since I last updated. My mother called 2 weeks ago and asked if she could come visit to talk about Avery. I consented since I assumed she'd come to see my point of view. When she arrived, she had Avery with her. They plotted this ambush together, hoping to force me to reconcile. I opened my door and found both of them standing there with bags, and I almost shut it. My mother quickly explained that they just wanted to talk and that Avery had something important to tell me. Avery was in tears before she even stepped inside. I welcomed them in but told them they couldn't stay in my house. They could find a motel if they planned to stay for more than a few hours. Avery instantly apologized. She admitted she had overstepped and apologized for following Ryan around. She claimed she was afraid of losing me and behaved out of panic. But then she said something that made me know she still had no idea what she had done wrong. She expressed her desire that I could forgive her error so that we could move forward and plan the wedding together. I asked her what error she was referring to. She agreed shooting the images was wrong, but she maintained her concerns about Ryan. She still believed I was rushing into marriage and Ryan was not ambitious enough for me. My mother nodded, saying Avery had excellent concerns concerning Ryan. She explained that they both wanted what was best for me. I asked my mother if she had seen the photographs Avery had taken. She responded yes, and that while Avery should not have followed Ryan, the images did raise some concerns about his relationship with another lady. I couldn't believe what I heard. I took out my phone and dialed Ryan, putting him on speaker. I urged him to tell my mother and Avery about Julia. Ryan stated that Julia was a friend and co-worker who had helped him organize a surprise for me. They had been meeting to finalize specifications for a bespoke jewelry box he was creating for our anniversary. He explained that he had been careful not to mention it around me because he wanted it to be a surprise. Then Ryan said something that made my stomach sink. He inquired if this was about the private investigator, as Julia had said that someone had been questioning both of them at work. Avery's face turned white. When I asked her what Ryan was talking about, she started crying again. It found out Avery had done more than merely take images. She'd hired someone to research Ryan and had been looking for dirt on him for months. The investigator had called Ryan's co-workers, including Julia, and inquired about his conduct and relationships. Julia told her husband about it, and they were both concerned that someone was stalking them. I looked at Avery and inquired how far she had traveled. She admits to conducting background investigations on Ryan and even calling his ex-girlfriend from college to inquire about their connection. My mother attempted to defend Avery by claiming she was only being thorough because she cared about me. She stated it was wise to know who you were marrying. I told both of them to go immediately. Avery began pleading, saying she would stop investigating Ryan if I would simply listen to her concerns. My mother told me I was being unfair, and that Avery had spent a lot of money to protect me. I stated I didn't care how much money Avery had spent on her infatuation. I informed them that they had 1 hour to pack and leave, or I will contact the cops. Ryan returned home from work early after they had left. He was frightened by the phone call and wanted to make sure I was all right. We chatted for hours about what Avery had done. Ryan informed me that the investigator had contacted his supervisor and other clients, inquiring about his work quality and personal life. His employer had pulled him away to see if he was in any legal problems. Ryan had felt perplexed and humiliated, but hadn't connected it to Avery until now. We also called Julia and her husband to apologize and explain what had occurred. They were relieved to finally understand why someone had inquired about them, but they were also disappointed that they had been drawn into family conflict. The next day my father called me. He claimed my mother had told him everything and he wanted to hear my side of the tale. My father remained silent for a long time after I told him about the private investigator and Ryan's co-workers' harassment. Finally, he denied knowing anything about it. He claimed my mother and Avery told him I was overreacting to some images, not that Avery hired someone to stalk my fiancé. My father apologized for not supporting me before. He claimed he would talk to my mother about Avery's behavior and attempt to explain why I was unhappy, but the harm had already been done. Our extended family had learned about the private investigator, and everyone was now taking sides. Some relatives believe Avery went too far, while others believe she was simply trying to protect her sister. My mother has called me every day, swinging between wrath and guilt. She claims I'm pulling the family apart, and that Avery is distraught. She constantly urging me to let Avery attend the wedding as a regular guest. I've not changed my mind. Avery is not invited, and anyone who brings her as a +1 will be asked to leave. Ryan and I decided to hire security for the wedding after his boss informed us that the investigator had inquired about our wedding date and venue. We're concerned Avery will try to show there regardless. The worst aspect is that this entire issue has ruined what should have been a pleasant period in our lives. Instead of discussing our future together, we are coping with Avery's fixation and my family's problems. I keep thinking if I could have handled this differently. But every time I think about Avery hiring a private investigator, I realize I made the correct decision. Update 2. The wedding happened 3 weeks ago, and I need to tell you what happened since it was worse than I feared. Security was absolutely the right decision. Avery attempted to show there, not as a guest, but as someone claiming to be me. She had apparently planned this for some weeks. Avery arrived at the wedding location wearing a white dress that was identical to mine. She had received a copy of my dress design, most likely from my mother. She informed the security guy that she was the bride and that the guest list had been mixed up. Luckily, the security team was ready. They asked for her ID and promptly called me. I was getting dressed in the bridal suite when they informed me that someone claiming to be me was trying to enter. I peeked out the window and noticed her arguing with security. She had done her hair and cosmetics just like mine. From a distance, we appeared identical. It felt like witnessing a warped version of myself. The security team took Avery off the site, but she did not go quietly. She stood in the parking lot, yelling that I was making a horrible mistake and that Ryan would cheat on me. Several visitors arrived early and heard everything. My mother was already inside the venue, helping with last-minute preparations. When security told her what had transpired, she dashed outside to speak with Avery. They had a loud quarrel in the parking lot, which half of the wedding party witnessed. My mother rushed back inside crying and asked me to let Avery stay for the ceremony. She said Avery was upset and only wanted to see me get married. I told her no, and that if she continued to push, she may leave as well. Despite all of this, the ceremony was magnificent. Ryan and I were able to focus on each other and forget about the commotion outside, although I noticed other people gazing around nervously, probably wondering if Avery would return. The situation deteriorated during the reception. Avery had obviously been watching from across the street. When she noticed guests going for restroom breaks or to smoke, she approached a few. My cousin Nathan approached me during supper and told me that Avery had stopped him outdoors. She had informed him that Ryan was already cheating, and she had proof. She handed him printouts of text messages allegedly exchanged between Ryan and other women. Nathan stated that the messages appeared to be false, as if someone had produced them using screenshots. The phone numbers did not correspond to any of Ryan's devices, and several of the messages mentioned topics that made no sense. But Avery did not stop there. She had made phony social media profiles with images of ladies from Ryan's office and was sending herself messages pretending to be them. She then collected screenshots of these fictitious exchanges as evidence. Nathan told me this, and I understood Avery had completely lost contact with reality. She had expanded her investigation beyond Ryan. She was actively fabricating evidence to support her claim. Ryan and I decided to contact the police. Avery was harassing, and the fabricated evidence may be called fraud. We wanted to film everything in case the situation went further. The cops collected our statement and stated they will speak with Avery. They stated that showing up to the wedding in a bridal gown may be deemed impersonation, and fabricating proof was absolutely prohibited. 2 hours later, my phone began ringing with calls from family members. Avery had been arrested. She was accused with harassment and falsifying records. My mother was at the police station trying to bail her out. I should have stayed at my own wedding reception, but I felt compelled to go to the station and confront this situation head-on. Ryan accompanied me, and we met my parents there. My mother laughed so hard. She continued insisting it was all my fault for not forgiving Avery sooner. She stated that if I had simply included Avery at the wedding, none of this would have occurred. My father looked fatigued. He drew me aside and told me that he had no idea about the false texts until the cops described what Avery had done. He claimed Avery had lied to both of my parents about the scope of her conduct. When Avery was released on bond, she appeared dreadful. Her makeup was smudged and her clothing was crumpled. When she saw me, she burst into tears, apologizing and pleading for her sister to return. But then she said something that showed me she still didn't comprehend. She expressed her hope that now that I had witnessed how far Ryan would go to turn me against my family, I would finally listen to her concerns. I inquired what she meant. She claimed Ryan's call to the police demonstrated his controlling and vengeful nature. She claimed that a good man would have forgiven her mistakes and attempted to resolve the situation quietly. That's when I realized Avery would never change. Even after being jailed, she continued to make Ryan the villain in her fiction. I told Avery I didn't want to see her again. I threatened to file a restraining order if she approached me, Ryan, or anyone else in our lives again. My parents attempted to object, but I was done listening. Ryan and I returned to the venue to resume our celebration. Most of our guests knew what had happened, but they were supportive and attempted to help us salvage the evening. My father called me the next day to apologize. He stated that he was seeking for divorce from my mother. He couldn't stay married to someone who encouraged Avery's actions while blaming me for the repercussions. My mother has been phoning me non-stop since then, but I have not responded. She left voicemails stating, "I am destroying the family, and that Avery needs help, not punishment." Avery's court date is next month. Her lawyer contacted us and asked if we would consider dropping the charges if Avery agreed to stay away from us. We said no. Avery must face serious consequences for what she did. Update 3: Avery was sentenced to 6 months probation and obligatory treatment last week. She must also pay restitution for the expense of our wedding security and will be unable to contact Ryan or myself for the next 2 years. However, it is not why I am writing this final update. Something happened that made me realize Avery's difficulties are far deeper than I previously imagined. 3 weeks ago I received a call from Lisa, Avery's college roommate. I hadn't communicated with Lisa since graduation, so I was surprised to hear from her. Lisa explained that she had heard of Avery's arrest through mutual acquaintances and wanted to tell me something important. She claimed she should have spoken up years ago but was frightened of becoming embroiled in family conflict. Lisa informed me that during college, Avery was preoccupied with emulating me in ways I had no idea about. She stated that Avery would browse through my social media profiles and copy my art creations before I posted them. Avery would turn in her copies first, making it appear that I was copying her. Avery had also started intercepting mail and items addressed to me in our shared apartment. She had opened acceptance letters from galleries and art competitions that I had submitted and discarded the ones that had received favorable feedback. Lisa explained that she tried to tell me about this during our senior year, but Avery persuaded her not to because I was already anxious about graduation and job seeking. But the worst thing was what Lisa said next. She claimed Avery had been undermining my relationships long before Ryan. In college, Avery would contact the guys I was dating and inform them that I was seeing other people or had said terrible things about them. Lisa showed me screenshots she had saved from years before. Avery had staged false text conversations that made it appear as if I was trash-talking my boyfriends to others. She had provided phony screenshots to the males I was dating, resulting in multiple breakups. I remembered those relationships ending abruptly, with men accusing me of things I had never said or done. At the time, I assumed they were immature or seeking for reasons to break up. I never suspected Avery was involved. Lisa apologized for not informing me sooner. She claimed she was young and afraid, that Avery had convinced her that she was protecting me from men who were not good enough. After meeting with Lisa, I began reaching out to other college classmates. 2 more of Avery's roommates confirmed similar accounts. Avery had been deliberately undermining my relationships and opportunities for years. I also discovered that Avery had been telling people we were going to start a business together after college. She had used my portfolio and artwork to apply for employment, stating that we were a creative partnership. When Avery failed to show up for interviews, several employers contacted me to inquire. Armed with this information, I decided to write to Avery's probation officer. I wanted them to understand that her behavior toward me and Ryan was part of a larger pattern of dishonesty and manipulation. The probation officer thanked me for the information, saying it would help Avery with his court-ordered counseling. They advised Avery to address these deeper concerns if she wanted to prevent more serious legal troubles in the future. My mother found out about the letter and called me yelling. She accused me of being vindictive and harsh by attempting to worsen Avery's punishment. She stated that Avery was sick and needed family assistance, not further legal issues. I told my mother that Avery had been actively ruining my life for years, and that I was done protecting her from the consequences. I said that if she wanted to help Avery, she could push her to accept responsibility for her actions rather than making excuses. My mother stated I was heartless, and she was embarrassed to name me her daughter. She claimed she would never forgive me for wrecking Avery's life. She then hung up on me. My father contacted me later that day. He admitted that he was unaware of Avery's undergraduate activities, but he was unsurprised. He stated he had always felt Avery had major mental health difficulties, but my mother had refused to seek professional treatment. He also informed me that my mother had been giving money to Avery while she was on probation, despite the court's order that she work and support herself. My mother had been lying to him about their finances to conceal these payments. My father stated that he had filed divorce papers and was leaving the family home. He stated he couldn't keep enabling Avery's conduct through my mother, and he was weary of being lied to. Ryan and I have been in couples counseling to get through all that has transpired. Our counselor informed us that we both have PTSD from Avery's harassment campaign, and that it will take time to totally trust that we are secure from her involvement. We also had to change our phone numbers and move to a new apartment because Avery had obtained our address and was mailing letters despite the restraining order. The letters were not threatening, but they were long, rambling apologies that demonstrated she still didn't know what she had done wrong. I have not spoken with my mother since our last phone talk. She attempted to contact me through relatives, but I begged them not to send along messages. I am not ready to be in a relationship with someone who believes I am the villain in this circumstance. Avery's probation officer phoned me last month, informing me that she had broken her probation by attempting to contact Ryan's workplace again. She called his supervisor pretending to be a client and inquired about Ryan's work schedule and personal life. Avery now faces jail time, rather than merely probation. Her lawyer requested us to testify on her behalf at the sentence, but we rejected. We have done everything we can to help Avery escape major repercussions, yet she continues to breach the court's rules. I know some people may think I'm being too severe by not assisting Avery at her sentencing, but I've learned that shielding Avery from repercussions simply allows her to continue harming others. Ryan and I plan to relocate to another state after his lease expires. We want to start again somewhere where Avery cannot find us. It seems severe, but we need to know we're entirely protected from her obsession. I never imagined I'd break off my twin sister forever, but Avery demonstrated that being family does not give someone the right to ruin your life. Some relationships, especially those involving individuals you care about, are too poisonous to heal. For anyone in a similar circumstance, believe your intuition about poisonous family members. You do not have to give anyone access to your life simply because you share DNA. Walking away from a situation is sometimes the most considerate thing you can do for everyone. Now let us go to the following narrative. Story 2. I struggled with infertility for 7 years. When I eventually became pregnant, my brother accused me of selfishness. Now he shows up intoxicated at my house, asking to see my newborn. I, 34, never imagined myself in this situation, divided between my lifelong desire of becoming a mother and my connection with my older brother, Nathan, 38. Growing up, Nathan and I were inseparable. He was my defender, confidant, and closest friend. We come from a close-knit family, and our parents constantly emphasized the value of sibling relationships. Nathan was the one who taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with my homework, and chased off the boys who tried to bully me in middle school. Our friendship grew stronger with age. Nathan was suspicious when I met my husband, Kevin, a 35-year-old male in college. He interrogated Kevin mercilessly during our first family dinner, inquiring about his ambitions and future plans. However, Nathan eventually came to consider Kevin as the brother he never had. They bonded over their mutual love of football and horrible dad jokes. Nathan was even Kevin's best man in our wedding 10 years ago. Everything changed when Kevin and I began trying for a baby 7 years ago. We were so happy and naive back then, assuming everything would happen swiftly. But month after month, we were disappointed. We initially kept it to ourselves, not wanting to concern our families. But as time passed and the difficulties became more evident, we opened up about our fertility problems. Nathan's wife, Julia, 36, became pregnant with their first child about the same time we began trying. I was truly delighted for them, but it was difficult to watch them start a family so easily while we battled. Nathan, who had always been my support, now appeared aloof and uncomfortable around me. He would dodge the issue of babies entirely, or make awkward jokes about how we needed to work harder. As our reproductive journey progressed, we had several rounds of IVF. Each setback was painful, but we tried to maintain optimism. During this time, Nathan and Julia had 2 additional children quickly. While I enjoyed being an aunt, each pregnancy announcement and baby shower seemed like a stab in my heart. Nathan's actions at this time were perplexing and hurtful. He appeared to alternate between completely shunning me and making offensive comments. After a particularly painful failed IVF round, he suggested to me during a family meal that I stop thinking about having a baby and instead pursue a hobby. I was astonished and upset, but I attempted to dismiss it, telling myself he simply didn't understand. 2 years ago, after our previous failed IVF treatment, our doctor advised us that our chances of conceiving were extremely slim. I was crushed. I slipped into a severe despair and scarcely left the house for weeks. Kevin was my rock during this time, but I could see how it was affecting him as well. Nathan's insensitivity peaked throughout this gloomy period. He'd often say things like, "Just relax, it'll happen when you stop trying so hard," or, "Maybe you're not meant to be a mom." Each word felt like a knife coming from my brother, who had once been my staunchest advocate. The matter reached a climax at our parents' 40th anniversary party last year. I had just learned that our last IVF round had failed, and I was feeling especially raw and vulnerable. I attempted to put on a brave face for our parents' sake, but my anguish was clearly obvious. Nathan cornered me in the kitchen as I was getting a glass of water. He began lecturing me on how I should get over it and stop being so selfish. He told me that my mopey attitude was destroying family gatherings, and that instead of wallowing in self-pity, I should be happy for him and Julia. He also implied that my fixation with having a baby was straining his relationship with Kevin. I was stunned. This was not the brother I knew or loved. I attempted to convey how cruel his words were, how the sorrow of infertility was not something I could simply get over. But he only became angrier, accusing me of being jealous of his children and trying to make everything about myself. Kevin came to check on me after the debate became heated. When he saw what was going on, he intervened, telling Nathan to back off and stop being so cruel. Nathan stormed out, furious. Kevin and I left the party early, disturbed by what had happened. Nathan and I have had a difficult relationship ever since. At family gatherings, he rarely speaks to me, and when he does, it is usually to make sarcastic remarks. Our parents attempted to mediate by hosting family dinners and encouraged us to speak things out. But Nathan refuses to admit he'd done anything wrong. He insists that I am overreacting and should mature. This schism has altered the entire family dynamic. Sophie, our younger sister, 30 female, feels trapped in the middle, attempting to maintain ties with both of us without taking sides. Our parents are anxious and upset by the dispute, frequently recalling the close relationship Nathan and I formerly had. Last month, something unexpected occurred. I began feeling nauseated and fatigued all the time. At first, I disregarded it as stress caused by continuing family strife and my hard profession as a high school teacher. However, after a few weeks when the symptoms did not improve, I decided to see my doctor. She informed me that I was roughly 12 weeks pregnant, which really surprised me. Kevin and I were ecstatic but yet apprehensive, considering our history. We opted to keep the news hidden until we were further along, not wanting to raise our hopes or cope with family reactions right away. However, over a family dinner last week, our mother noted that I wasn't drinking wine, which was unusual for me. She guessed quickly and was overjoyed. In her excitement, she began informing everyone at the table, including Nathan and Julia. Nathan's reply did not meet my expectations. Instead of being pleased for us, he accused me of stealing his thunder. Julia is reportedly pregnant with their fourth child, and they intend to announce it at the next family gathering. He felt it was selfish of me to become pregnant now since his children were old enough to enjoy having a newborn cousin. I felt hurt and enraged. This felt like the final nail in the coffin after years of insensitivity and harsh comments regarding our fertility issues. Kevin, my constant defender, informed Nathan that his actions were wrong and that if he couldn't be pleased for us, he should keep his feelings to himself. The evening ended in pandemonium, with Nathan and Julia leaving abruptly and our parents attempting to calm things down. Since then, Kevin and I have agreed to minimize our contact with Nathan and Julia during my pregnancy. We do not want any more stress at this high-risk period. Some family members, particularly our sister Sophie and our uncle Victor, 58, believe we are overreacting. They suggest we shouldn't give up our relationship with Nathan over this. That family is extremely essential. But I believe this is simply the culmination of years of cruel behavior. Is it terrible that I want to distance myself from my brother during what should be one of the best periods of my life? How can I strike a balance between my want to safeguard my mental health and pregnancy and the need to maintain family harmony? I never imagined I'd have to choose between my brother and my own well-being, yet here I am, feeling lost and divided. Update 1. It's been approximately 2 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. I'm 20 weeks pregnant, and we just found out we're having a girl. Kevin and I are overjoyed, but Nathan's position has deteriorated more. After we revealed our plan to limit contact, Nathan went on a rampage. He began calling our parents, Sophie and other relatives, claiming that we were being dramatic and selfish. He even went on a huge Facebook rant about how family should always come first, and how heartbroken he was that we were pushing him away without reason. Our parents were originally torn. They've always been peacemakers, and the prospect of their children fighting is distressing for them. Mom would contact me virtually every day, tearfully imploring for us to sort things out. Dad, who is normally more stoic, appeared disoriented and unsure how to handle the situation. They wanted everyone to get along and couldn't understand why we couldn't simply talk it out. But then something unexpected occurred. Our 32-year-old female relative Maya contacted me privately. Maya and I were close as children, but we grew apart as she traveled across the nation for work. She told me she had been following the family drama from a distance and felt driven to share her own experience with Nathan. Maya apparently suffered a miscarriage 2 years ago. She had been about 10 weeks pregnant and was horrified. She had confided in Nathan during a rare visit home, and he had been equally insensitive. According to Maya, he encouraged her to get over it because the baby wasn't even born yet. He argued she was overreacting and should be thankful it happened early rather than later in the pregnancy. Maya's story stunned me. It was like a missing puzzle piece fell into fit, revealing a pattern of conduct I hadn't previously noticed. It also gave me the strength to tell our parents about Nathan's harsh words and actions over the years. I showed them text conversations in which he insulted our fertility issues and rejected our pain. I described situations at family gatherings in which he made offensive remarks or jokes about us. Our parents were startled. They had no knowledge of Nathan's actions. Mom burst into tears, apologizing for not realizing what was happening, and for forcing us to reconcile. Dad, who has always been a man of few words, merely stated that he was disappointed in Nathan and understood our need for distance. This discovery altered the family dynamic substantially. Our parents stopped urging us to make amends with Nathan and began setting their own boundaries. They informed Nathan that his behavior was inappropriate and that he needed to apologize and make apologies if he wanted to fully participate in family functions. Nathan didn't take it well. He accused me of inciting the family against him and manipulating our parents. He began sending angry letters to everyone, accusing us of conspiring against him and Julia. Last weekend, at a family BBQ, things became heated. It was meant to be a small party to commemorate Sophie's recent promotion at work. Kevin and I had declined to attend because we knew Nathan and Julia would be present. However, midway through the event, Sophie gave us a frantic call. Nathan apparently arrived in a nasty attitude, having already consumed a few drinks. He immediately began making passive-aggressive remarks about how some individuals believe they are too good for family. When Sophie ordered him to stop, he became louder and more obnoxious, complaining about how unfair everyone was to him. Kevin and I decided to go over and try to defuse the situation. When we arrived, the anxiety was evident. Nathan, red-faced and slurring slightly, quickly focused on us. He began throwing accusations, claiming that we were pulling the family apart and that we were greedy for hogging all the attention with our pregnancy. Kevin tried to calm him down, speaking in a low, soothing tone, and asking Nathan to consider the anguish he was causing. But Nathan was beyond reason. He got in Kevin's face, poked his chest, and asked if he wanted to take it outside. That's when our father stepped in. I've never seen him this angry. He physically positioned himself between Nathan and Kevin, telling Nathan that his behavior was inappropriate, and that if he couldn't be supportive, he should leave. Nathan was stunned. He tried to disagree, but our mother stood by Dad, stating Nathan's activities were harming everyone and that he needed to step back and reflect on his behavior. Nathan and Julia drove away in a fury, with Nathan yelling that we'd regret this. The rest of us were left terrified, with the BBQ effectively wrecked. Sophie was in tears, feeling guilty about organizing the event in the first place. Our parents were older than I had ever seen them, worn out by the battle. Since then, Nathan has been sending angry texts to everyone, saying that we have turned the family against him. He's been posting vague angry posts on social media, prompting worrisome responses from extended relatives and old acquaintances who don't know the whole situation. Most relatives are ignoring him, but a few, like our Aunt Caroline, 55 female, and Uncle Victor, continue to pressure us to reunite for the sake of family harmony. They keep talking about how we'll regret this schism once our parents are gone, and how family should always come first. But Kevin and I are standing firm. We've opted to focus on getting ready for our daughter's arrival and surround ourselves with good, helpful people. We've started taking childbirth classes and have been busy preparing the nursery. Kevin's parents, who live a few hours away, have been incredibly helpful, frequently driving up on weekends to assist and provide emotional support. It's unfortunate that Nathan will not be able to join us during this joyful period of our lives. There are times when I miss the brother I once had. The one who protected me and made me laugh. But then I remember all of the misery he has caused, and I know we are making the correct decision for our mental health and our baby's well-being. As my due date approaches, I'm trying to focus on the joy of being a mother rather than the family drama. But it's difficult not to wonder what the future holds. Will Nathan ever comprehend the pain he has caused? Will our family ever be able to mend from this rift? Only time will tell. Update 2. Another several months have passed, and I am now 32 weeks pregnant. The situation with Nathan has taken an unexpected turn, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. Last month, Julia texted me and asked if we might meet for coffee. Given what had happened, I was cautious, but my curiosity won out. We met at a quiet cafe near my house, and Julia's words left me reeling. She began by apologizing for not confronting Nathan's actions throughout the years. She said that things in their marriage had not been going well for a long time, even before the recent turmoil. Nathan's insensitivity appears to extend beyond family members who are suffering with fertility. He has been dismissive of Julia's issues with postpartum depression since their last child, and has been spending more and more time away from home. Julia revealed that she has been pondering leaving Nathan. She stated that watching Kevin support me made her realize how unhealthy her own relationship is. She informed me about situations I was unaware of, such as Nathan mocking her professional goals, rejecting her fears about their children, and even flirting with other women at parties. I was sympathetic, but apprehensive. While I accepted her apologies and felt terrible for her position, I made it plain that it did not erase years of pain. I suggested that she speak with a therapist or counselor to sort through her emotions and determine her next actions. After our meeting, I felt conflicted. Part of me felt vindicated that someone else recognized Nathan's behavior for what it was, while another part of me was saddened by the degradation of a once strong friendship. Nathan unexpectedly arrived at our house a week after Julia's confession. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Kevin and I were putting together the crib for the nursery. Nathan looked terrible. Unshaven, with big circles under his eyes that indicated he hadn't slept in days. He burst out screaming almost immediately, stating Julia had abandoned him and taken the kids to her parents' place. Between sobbing, he told us that Julia had given him an ultimatum: either receive assistance for his anger and drinking issues, or she will file divorce. Nathan requested us to help him resolve issues with Julia and the rest of the family. He admitted he had been a horrible jerk and wanted to make amends. He even got down on his knees, pleading with me to contact Julia on his behalf. I felt conflicted. Part of me felt bad for him. This broken man was so unlike the strong, protective older brother I previously knew. But a greater part of me was still upset at how he had treated us and suspicious of his sudden change of heart. Kevin and I exchanged a look, silently communicating as we frequently do. Then, as gently as possible, we told Nathan that, while we were sorry he was going through a difficult time, we couldn't help him. We advised him to seek professional help to resolve his troubles, both for his own and his family's sake. Nathan didn't take it well. His sorrow immediately turned to rage. He accused us of being callous, claiming we were kicking him while he was down. He stated that he could not believe his own sister would desert him in his time of need. Then he stormed out, slamming our front door so fiercely that the portraits rattled against the walls. We haven't heard from Nathan directly since then, but the family gossip has been rife. Our parents called the next day to inform us that Nathan had arrived at their home in a similar state. They're trying to persuade him to go to therapy, but he's not interested. Sophie contacted me in tears, explaining that Nathan had been leaving her rambling, sometimes incomprehensible voicemails. She is concerned about his mental health, but she is unsure how to help. I urged her to retain her distance for now, and to encourage Nathan to seek professional help if he contacted her again. The entire incident has elicited a range of complex emotions. While I don't want to see my brother suffer, I also don't feel ready to welcome him back into my life, especially with the kid on the way. His explosive behavior is troubling, and I'm concerned about the stress it may bring for me and the baby. Continuing from where we left off, Kevin and I are attempting to focus on the final preparations for our daughter's arrival, but the family drama is obviously putting a pall over what should be a joyous occasion. We've finished putting up the nursery, a serene space painted in subtle yellows and greens. Kevin's mother assisted us in decorating, and it has quickly become my favorite room in the house. Sometimes I sit in the rocking chair, caressing my belly and chatting to our little girl, trying to distract myself from the family drama. We've started going to childbirth classes twice a week. The other expectant parents have formed a type of support network. It's wonderful to be around people who don't know about our family problems and simply see us as a happy couple expecting their first kid. Despite everything, I'm trying to have a positive attitude and concentrate on the wonder that is growing inside of me. After years of believing it would never happen, each kick and movement seems like a priceless gift. Kevin has been my rock throughout this, attending every doctor's visit, satisfying my midnight desires, and knowing when I need a hug or a listening ear. As my due date approaches, I can't help but ponder about the future. Will Nathan get the help he requires? Will our family ever be able to mend from this rift? Only time will tell. Update 3. Our beautiful daughter, Lily, was born 3 weeks ago. The birth was difficult. I needed an emergency C-section after 20 hours of labor, but Lily and I are doing well now. The instant they placed her in my arms, all of the sorrow and hardship of the previous year seemed to vanish. Kevin has been an amazing rock through everything, seldom leaving our side during our hospital stay. Coming home with Lily has been a roller coaster of emotions. We're fatigued, but utterly smitten with our little child. The nights are long, and the days are full of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen naps. But every time Lily wraps her tiny fingers around my finger, or Kevin makes her smile, my heart feels like it will burst with joy. Unfortunately, the drama with Nathan has not faded. He did not contact us when Lily was born, despite our parents informing him. They said he has been asking about her, but he is furious because we did not tell him about the birth ourselves. It's frustrating because it appears that he's making Lily's birth about him rather than celebrating her new life. Our parents and Sophie have been to see Lily several times, and they adore her. It's bittersweet to watch them with her, knowing that in another universe, Nathan and his family would also be there. Sophie revealed that Nathan's children have been asking about their new cousin, wondering why they haven't met her yet. Julia called us again last week. She and the children are still living with her parents, and she has initiated divorce proceedings. Nathan evidently refused to get therapy or admit his problems, leaving her with no choice. She asked whether we would be willing to write a statement on Nathan's behavior throughout the years, which could be significant to their custody arrangements. Kevin and I are still deciding whether or not to become involved. On the one hand, we want to encourage Julia while also ensuring the children's health. On the other hand, we're concerned about getting drawn into legal processes and potentially worsening our issue with Nathan. The most recent development occurred yesterday, and it has left us shaken. Nathan arrived at our place in the evening, definitely wasted. He began hammering on the door, yelling about how we had ruined his life and demanding to see his niece. Lily was sleeping when his ranting woke her up, causing her to wail. Kevin managed to calm Nathan down and get him to go without incident, but it was frightening. The notion of Nathan's unpredictable conduct around our newborn daughter is unsettling. We're really considering getting a restraining order, which I never expected to have to do against my own brother. This entire issue has shown me how toxic Nathan's presence in our lives has been. While I hope he gets the care he requires, my current concern is to safeguard my daughter and our small family. We're thinking of relocating to a new house in a different neighborhood, partially to give Lily more space as she develops, but also to get away from all the turmoil. We've also begun to discuss the prospect of family therapy, not necessarily with Nathan right now, but potentially with our parents and Sophie. There's a lot of hurt and confusion to get through, and we believe that having a neutral third party may help us manage these complex emotions and familial dynamics. Despite everything, the last few weeks with Lily have been the happiest of my life. Kevin and I are fatigued but incredibly smitten with our little child. We're focusing on enjoying this precious time and creating a positive, loving atmosphere for our baby. Every day, I gaze at Lily and feel grateful for the difficult route that led her to us. While Nathan's situation has been heartbreaking, it has also increased my appreciation for the healthy, supportive relationships in my life. As we move forward, our objective is to surround Lily with love, positivity, and strong, healthy family bonds, whatever that family looks like.